Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's meeting. Councillor Gates, how are you today?
Thank you. Thank you for asking.
Councillor Owen-Jones, good morning.
G'day, mate. How's it going?
Very good. Councillor Peter Young, how are you today?
Very well, thanks, Chair.
Councillor Patterson, lovely to see you. Thank you. Councillor Bowden-Lumsden, how are you?
Very good.
Sorry, Councillor Bob LaCastro, this planning committee. What?
Hey.
It's a pleasure to have you here, and we thank you for your attendance and look forward to it continuing. For Councillor O'Neill, good morning to you. Councillor Taylor, how are you today? And Councillor Vorster. Councillor Pauline Young is just a couple minutes away, but we look forward to her joining us soon. Good morning to the Director and Manager and our massive gaggle of city officers in the back, and good morning to our support staff.
Chair,
Yes.
could I also say a very friendly good morning to Tanya, William and Matthew?
Mate, based on the text message I got 10 minutes ago, I don't know if they're watching this at the moment. There might be a bit of a screaming match between the toddler and the newborn. Okay, we'll kick things off. So Councillor Young will be here in a few minutes, so we'll just leave that open for now. I have no leave of absence requests. A confirmation of minutes of the last meeting. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the minutes of the previous planning meeting? Councillor Gates, a seconder. Councillor O'Neill, thank you for that. We'll take the vote on the minutes of the previous meeting. All those in favour? That's carried. Conflict of interest declarations. So we have 3 recorded for Councillor Gates that we're going to deal with up front. Councillor Gates, the first one is on the screen in regards to item 6.1.
Correct, and that details an allocation from RPS back in 2011 of $675, and I'm seeking to remain in the room.
Councillors, I'm happy to move a motion that Councillor Gates may participate in the decision due to the conflict being remote and minor and the public interest being served and her participation in the decision.
Yeah, I'll second that, Chair.
That's seconded by Councillor Peter Young. Very good. All those in favour of that motion? Councillor Vorster, how are you voting?
You have to do the division.
Oh, yep. Sorry, division on this one, sorry. All those in favour? Councillor Hamill, Councillor Owen-Jones, Councillor Peter Young, Councillor Gail O'Neill and Councillor Vorster. And can we note that Councillor Pauline Young wasn't in the room and that Councillor Gates did not vote? Councillor Gates, the next item was in regards to 6.3.
Correct, Councillor Hamill, and I just wanted to remind councillors that the last legal opinion confirmed that any amounts refunded in full were not to be considered as part of any declaration, that they were irrelevant and not considered by the Electoral Commission at the time. And so there was $1,850 from Arcadis in 2015. Oh, sorry, and from Mitchell Bray, who's an employee, in 2014, $1,950. But I'm hoping to remain in the room and participate in the decision.
Councillors, we have seen this particular declaration from Councillor Gates several times, and I know I have definitely moved procedural motions in the past with the exact same wording as the last one, so I'm happy to do that again. Is there any questions on this one for Councillor Gates before I seek a seconder for the words? In that case, do I have a seconder for my procedural motion? Councillor Owen-Jones, thank you. And we'll take a division on this one as well. So all those in favour? Councillor Hamill, Councillor Owen-Jones, Councillor Peter Young, Councillor O'Neill, Councillor Vorster. And please note that Councillor Pauline Young was not in the room and that Councillor Gates did not vote. Councillor Gates, the item for 6.7 is the exact same declaration, is that correct?
That's correct.
In that case, I am happy to move the same procedural motion again. Councillor Owen-Jones is happy to second again. We'll give the minute to catch up. Division's called. All those in favour? Councillor Hamill, Councillor Owen-Jones, Councillor Peter Young, Councillor O'Neill, Councillor Vorster. And please again note that Councillor Pauline Young was not in the room and that Councillor Gates did not vote. Councillors, I'm not aware of any other conflicts of interest to be raised today. Councillor Young, do you have one?
Chairman, mine's not a declarable conflict, but it's a matter I thought I should bring to committee's attention with regard to item 6.2, which is a proposal for a hotel at Movie World at Oxenford. I live within a reasonable vicinity of the site, and in fact my properties are just outside of the mapped area shown on the maps on page 224 and 225. So it's the property that I own and live on. I don't think it's a declarable conflict, but I'm just alerting the committee to that.
So thank you for bringing it to our attention. Councillor, a question to all the councillors. Does anyone have a concern with what Councillor Peter Young has raised at all? No further questions on it? In that case, thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Vorster.
Thank you very much, Mr Chairman. On today's agenda, item 6.4 deals with a childcare centre proposed at 62 Cotloo Street. One of the submitters against that particular development is a former board member of Destination Gold Coast, and I served on that board in my capacity as council's appointed observer alongside Mr Punch for some time. Obviously, the entity now no longer exists, and I've since been removed as an observer, but I thought I'd draw the meeting's attention to my relationship with Mr Punch in case there was a view that I might have a declarable conflict of interest.
Again, Councillor Vorster, thank you for raising that. Councillor Gates, did you have a question on that?
I don't have a question, but I'm aware of a submitter who was also a donor to me. So I hadn't contemplated, I never met with them. I did, like every other councillor, receive correspondence. And if you recall, I requested permission to meet thinking they were the applicants for the project, but they were actually a submitter. So it was UPS, and I'm happy to declare that if the...
So I might just come back first. So, councillors, can I check first, does anyone have any concerns for Councillor Vorster or any further interest in taking any further detail on that one? No? So, Councillor Vorster, thank you for raising that one. Councillor Gates, if you think it is best to raise that conflict on UPS...
I do, but I wonder, can the officers bring up my last UPS declaration? There's not one today. You'll have to go into the records. Sorry, Councillor Hamill, I didn't contemplate that.
That's all right.
And if it's quicker, I can go and get the information if you haven't got a record.
Councillors, yeah, we'll let Councillor Gates go and get that just so the Minute Secretary can get this finished. Councillor Owen-Jones.
So, Chair, while we're in the mood for making declarations towards submitters, so I do know one of the submitters who, in a previous lifetime, about 15 years ago, I sold a commercial property to, but I hadn't thought of it in the context of needing to make a declaration.
In that case, it would sound like you don't have an issue, but if no one else has got a problem with it, I think that's fine.
Yeah, so and just to be clear, the submitter is David Armenoris, who is the adjacent landowner.
That's fine. Councillors, we'll just wait for Councillor Gates to come back with that paperwork for the Minute Secretary. If everyone's happy, we'll just adjourn for 5 minutes until that comes down. So meeting adjourned for 5 minutes. Meeting, please. We welcome Councillor Pauline Young. Good morning. Blew me off. Rude. Morning, Pauline. Morning. That's fine. Councillor Gates, our minute secretary has got that together. Can we just confirm you're happy with that, please? Very good. And that is the words that we used last time this declaration came up, which I'm happy to move if there's a seconder for that procedural motion. Councillor Pauline Young. And we'll take division on this. All those... Oh. Seconded, Councillor Pauline Young. Division's called. All those in favour. Councillor Hamill, Councillor Jones, Councillor Peter Young, Councillor O'Neill, Councillor Vorster, Councillor Pauline Young. Councillor Gates did not vote. That is dealt with. If there's no other conflicts of interest, we'll get into the meeting proper. Very good. We'll start with 6.1, Broadbeach Placemaking Plan. Sorry, we can go through that first too. Councillors, items that you'd like to one-star, I'm pretty confident it's all of them, but Councillor Patterson.
6.3 and 6.4. Thank you.
6.4. I'm guessing since Councillor Castro is here that he wants to do 6.5, and I won't be rude and leave it starred on him.
6.6, thanks.
6.6 for Councillor O'Neill. And is there an interest in unstarring 6.7, or is there questions or? 6.7 is starred at the stage, Councillor Jones.
The Chair?
There is, yes.
I think that we should have a presentation given the lateness of the report,
Yep.
but given the importance of the project.
So, Councillor Taylor, I know you didn't have any major concerns with 6.1, but you did wish just to speak in it quickly, or yeah. So we'll unstar it just so Councillor Taylor can speak to it quickly. In that case, all items are unstarred, so we'll start with 6.1. Councillor Patterson.
Sorry, are we keeping the same order?
No, the other one will come in after this one. So 6.1, is there any questions from any councillors on 6.1 for the officers? In that case, I'm happy to move it, but I'm going to allow Councillor Taylor to speak to it.
Thank you, Chair.
Would you like a seconder?
Councillor Owen Jones, seconds.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank the team that's been working on this plan for the last couple of years. Another important part of our city business district, and over the years we have had upgrades of Surf Parade, but there's other areas of the mall, the foreshore that we need to ensure that we keep at the highest level with the casino, convention centre in the area. It's really important that this area is kept on the radar, and I think the team did a really good job in community consultation with business and the local community to come up with a plan that they've done. So I just wanted to thank the team for the work they did in this space.
Councillor Taylor, thank you for that. Councillors, any other contributions on this item? In that case, thank you, officers, and we'll take a vote on 6.1. All those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Very good, thank you. Councillors, we're going to just go out of order for the items and bring the student accommodation one at Belinga forward as the next item. So we're going to do 6.6 next. Good morning, officers. We'll take a presentation and then get into questions.
No worries. Through the chair, item 6.6 is an application for a development permit for a material change of use seeking to establish rooming accommodation, student accommodation at 99 Golden Ford Drive in Belinga. The site consists of a single allotment located at 99 Goldenford Drive, which is a corner lot and has a frontage to both Goldenford Drive and Johnston Street. Site contains a two-storey dwelling gaining access from Johnston Street, and contains a two-storey dwelling and doesn't have any significant vegetation. In the broader context, the site's located on the northeastern side of the Gold Coast Highway, directly opposite to the main entrance of the Gold Coast Airport. Southern Cross University is located to the south, approximately 600 metres walking distance from the subject site. The site's located within the medium-density residential zone, which generally extends along the coastal strip of Blinga to the north and south. Moving to the southeast, there are two smaller neighbourhood centres, and the Kira neighbourhood centre located to the southeast, and the Coolangatta Major Centre. The applicant's proposed to establish rooming accommodation use, providing for student accommodation, contains a total of 182 bedrooms and 212 beds. The development is proposed in a 12-storey building with a maximum height of 34.5 metres. The application is impact accessible due to the land use proposed and due to the building height exceeding the mapped height of 23 metres by a total of 50%. The development includes 2 levels of basement, which include parking for 25 resident spaces, 17 car share spaces, and bicycle parking. On the ground floor, an ancillary cafe and student dining area has been proposed with communal open space. It's noted that within the officer's recommendation, conditions have been included to limit the scope of the ancillary cafe to only service the residents of the development and not to be open to the general public. Above, on level 1, a mix of units and communal open space has been provided in the form of a games room and theatre. The remainder of the building contains a typical floor plan, which includes 14 single-bedroom units and a 3-bedroom unit that provides a total of 6 beds. In order to comply with acceptable outcome 1 of the Transport Code, the development must provide a parking rate of 1 space per 2 students based on the maximum occupancy, which would equate to a total of 106 total parking spaces. Given a total of 44 parking spaces have been provided, compliance with the acceptable outcome is not achieved. Notwithstanding this, acceptable outcome 4.2 of the Transport Code allows the applicant to apply car sharing travel demand measures in accordance with this following table. So this table shows that each car share vehicle offsets 5 parking spaces, which equates to a relaxation of 4 spaces. The result of this is shown in the below table, where the 17 car share spaces equates to 85 parking spaces, and therefore brings the effective total parking supply to 112 spaces. Based on this, officers consider that the applicant has achieved compliance with this table and with acceptable outcome 4.2 of the Transport Code, and by applying the travel demand measures anticipated within the Transport Code, the applicant has therefore demonstrated compliance with performance outcome 1, in that sufficient off-street parking spaces have been provided to meet the parking demand of the development. Officers have considered that the proposed land use is appropriate for the subject site, given its proximity to a university and the offering of a housing type that is not readily available within the surrounding area. Officers' assessment of the uplift provisions within the strategic framework have considered that the building height is appropriate given its context and the emerging building height character of the area, the interface with the adjoining lots, and the standard of built form provided. As such, officers have recommended that the development permit be approved subject to conditions. Any questions?
Councillors, questions? Councillor O'Neill.
Thanks, Chair. Can you tell us, I didn't notice it in the report, are there any agreements with any management group to actually manage this student accommodation building?
Through the Chair to the Councillor, there's no agreement that's been provided. There has been discussions with the applicant, but there's nothing in the actual application material that locks them to a certain operator.
It's another question too. I know that Southern Cross University, that's in close proximity, is mentioned in the report, but it's only mentioned in a very light manner that there's no affiliation between the university and the developer or any management group that could actually manage the student accommodation. Is that correct?
Through the Chair to the Councillor, that's correct. There's no formal link that they've provided between the applicant and the university. They had provided a draft memorandum of understanding between the two bodies, but there wasn't actually, they're not the applicant, and the uni hasn't been included in the application.
And just one bonus question. Is there any needs analysis done for student accommodation in relation to the Southern Cross University that was connected with the application?
Through the chair, there was no needs assessment provided, and officers didn't request a needs assessment as part of the assessment of the application.
Okay, I'd just like to, when the time comes, a change recommendation, Chair.
We'll continue on with questions for now. Councillors, any other questions? I did have one for the officer just in regards, in reading the, there's been a couple information requests and further information requests on this application over the couple of years this one has been in the system. Can I get an idea of what has gone on in that time? So there's been a lot of built form changes and other changes of what's happened during those information requests?
That's right. So there's been, the application was originally lodged in July 2020. There's a bit more of an in-depth analysis of the background on page 688 of the agenda, but there's been a numerous further information requests and also change applications, which resulted in a different built form, but they've also included an extra level of basement, which also allowed to include the car share scheme in the application, which has ultimately resulted in officers recommending approval.
Councillor Owen-Jones, question?
So, yeah, if that's okay, Mr Chair. So just in regards to the car share scheme, have we approved any other similar type of size projects with that volume of car sharing?
Through you, Mr Chair, not of this scale. We have approved a few, but at a much more smaller scale.
So we don't have any evidence yet of success or otherwise of this innovative approach to providing car parks where car parks don't exist?
Through you, Mr Chair, not on the Gold Coast, no.
And are you aware of success anywhere else?
Through you, Mr Chair, yes.
So in what type of environment though? Like as in CBD Sydney, or, you know, as in what example of where it works?
Through you, Mr Chair, there are worldwide examples of cities having successful car share schemes, but not on the Gold Coast, no.
If it's on that point, then we'll go there. So Councillor Pauline Young.
So I believe there's one in Brisbane at Green Slopes around there. There's one student share accommodation there. I know quite a few students who are living in it where it has none of them have cars because it's a very limited supply. They've got a car share experience. They're close to public transport, and in speaking to the local councillor there not long ago, it has been a very successful outcome. That's that really big coloured one just as you're going the highway into Brisbane. Yeah, and it's very well supported, and a lot of Gold Coast students actually who go in Brisbane live there.
Councillor Gates, your question?
Thank you, Chair. I think car parking is definitely a concern with this proposed development. I think we all recognise we need student accommodation, but in regard to the various information requests, was there ever consideration given to an additional level of car parking being provided rather than the solution that's being suggested?
Through the chair to the councillor, the original application only had one level of basement.
Yep.
So through the changes and the change applications that came in, there wasn't an additional level of basement added.
I recognise that, I read that, but was it ever suggested they needed another one? A third basement car park?
The applicant had never proposed it. Up until the car share was introduced, they never complied with the acceptable outcome for car parking. So it was requested that additional car parking was provided, which would have effectively resulted in an additional level of basement.
Right, and is it correct that there's 24 or 25 spaces available on each level of car parking?
Through the chair, it's 25 total for just dedicated resident spaces.
For the two levels?
Yeah.
So there's only about another 12 if they went to a third level of basement car parking, another 12 spaces would be provided?
Through the chair, we'd have to double check. It's 25 and then there's 17 additional car share spaces. So,
are they on the level of basement car parking, the car share spaces?
That's correct, on the first level of basement, and the second level of basement is exclusively resident spaces.
Okay, thank you.
I'll go to Councillor Peter Young first.
Yeah, I just wanted to focus on the servicing for the building. It's part of the report addresses servicing. So there's a number of elements of that, I imagine. There's servicing for waste, servicing for the residents, and servicing for the cafe. Am I right?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Okay, so all of those things, there should be some kind of provision for service vehicles. You might have removal vehicles for the residents, or there might be vehicles to bring products to the cafe, or obviously waste servicing, but there's no provision on site. All of that servicing is meant to be on the road?
Through the chair, that's correct. There's no servicing location on site. And
have we contemplated what sort of impacts it's going to have on the traffic and parking and other activity in the street?
Through the chair, in terms of the servicing for the actual student accommodation, it's not anticipated that there'd be a high demand for servicing, given how it's intended to operate is that the rooms will be furnished, so the students moving in and out of the site won't be having their own removal vehicles.
Great.
In terms of the cafe, when it does need servicing, there is a dedicated park. Whether or not any service vehicle could use that park, if it couldn't, it would be on the street.
Councillor Patterson.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Back onto the car shared service. First of all, is it the body corporate's responsibility to own these shares, to own the cars?
Through the chair, it would be an operator. There wouldn't be a body corporate, but there would be an overarching operator, but it would be their responsibility. And it would be up to them whether or not they do it themselves or have a third party that manages the car sharing scheme.
Okay, and with your recommendation, does it, say we're 2 or 3 years down the track, and they go, look, you know what, we don't actually want to run this shared car anymore. Is there any enforcement capability we have on that to say, no, you can't just change those car parks to a normal car park? How do we force them to maintain a shared car service in perpetuity?
Through the chair to the councillor, we do have a number of conditions of approval that require it. We'd also gone to the extra step of including a property notification, and part of that says that the car share scheme is integral to the development, and that if it isn't operated, that it would be a development offence. So it would, and that ties back to the conditions of approval. So we have included conditions to ensure that it has to be operated.
Okay, so just to, if you can just share with me practically, we're 5 years down the track, that occurs, what happens? What happens then? So, but we find they've gone, look, you know what, this is not working, we just want to turn it to normal car parks. So we would provide an enforcement notice. Is there a fine? How does that work?
Through you, Mr Chair, as Nathan has said, we have several conditions and property notifications that really what that means is if they chose not to, it would be a development offence. It would be, and show cause notice, enforcement orders, council would have the option to take legal action on it. Right, okay, so we, through the chair, would need potentially, like, I mean, this is something we're expecting for next 10, well, as long as that building's standing, right? So we could say 30 years. If we wanted it and they didn't, it would require council to go and take legal action against them, against the body corporate of the time. I find it very difficult to see how realistic this is if that body corporate in the future just goes, you know what, we don't want to run this thing anymore.
So, Councillor Patterson, that's probably straying into debate. We'll let the officers answer the original question, which probably isn't one there. It's probably more of a point, so we won't even worry about that one. But your point's made. I don't think there was a question amongst that. Councillor Owen-Jones, and then we'll come to you, Councillor Vorster.
So I'm interested in whether or not, given the fact that they're just effectively single bedrooms for students, are they able to be strata titled?
Through the chair to the councillor, no. We've got a specific condition of approval that limits them from being titled separately, so they all have to be under the single ownership.
And so the entire building has to be under single ownership, or, for example, could they strata floors if they wanted?
The condition limits them from having any sort of building format plan or single titles in there, so it would limit them from having individual floors.
Okay, which in a way, so if the building gets built and there's original development conditions that don't allow that, they could go through another application process at a future date, but we would pay some attention to the original approvals. So a further question, if that's okay, Chair. So just in regards to the car parking, so I'm struggle with the car sharing in this volume for this site, but the single ownership in a way leads to better outcomes in that space. But if there isn't a provider of the car sharing, there's then a breach notice, and then they may need to see how else they may conduct the same business or a dissimilar business like backpacking where you don't need car parking. Is that right? Okay, thank you.
Councillor Vorster, your question?
Thank you very much, Mr Chairman. For the benefit of the committee, my questions are informed by two things. Number one, I have a student accommodation operator that does not have a relationship with the university operating in my patch. And also there's a development application afoot for student accommodation in Varsity where I've interrogated some of these issues. My first question just relates to the car sharing program and whether the proponent down the track would be able to rely on third-party car sharing services being available to satisfy their development conditions. So for example, at the moment we've got like Car Next Door, which was purchased by Uber, I think, but there are others that allow people to share cars within a neighbourhood. And I just wonder, to what extent could it be arguable down the track, should this operator not, so this proponent not operate a car sharing scheme themselves, could they rely on the fact that there are car sharing services available within their transport catchment?
Through the chair to the councillor, condition 19 is in relation to the car share scheme, and point AI states that a minimum 17 car share vehicles must be provided for the exclusive use of all residents, and these must not be made available for the use by the general public. And that's in relation to either the operator operating the car share scheme or a third party operator.
All right, so just for clarity's sake then, I suppose what I'm trying to get at is the proposed condition firm enough to require that those 17 vehicles are contained wholly on site and not on the street, provided by the likes of Uber, for example, who may be able to lock the availability of those vehicles to residents living at this premises?
Through you, Mr Chair, there's a number of conditions that tie the car share vehicles to the site. Condition 18, provide a minimum of 44 car parking spaces comprising 42 resident spaces, including 17 car share spaces. Condition 19 also mentions the 17 car share vehicles must be made available on the site. Condition 1 will have a basement plan with the car share vehicles. Yep. There are a number of conditions that actually require them to be on site.
I just think if there is an appetite to support this, which I think it's unclear at this stage, at least from my perspective, we need more robust language around making sure that these vehicles are to remain in their designated spots, specifically in that basement, if not being used. Because I've had examples where we've provided car parking. I think about the Super Centrelink, for example, where car parking was provided at Robina Town Centre for those staff, but we didn't take the step of ensuring that the vehicles have to be located in those car parking spaces, and we've ended up with them in our libraries. My other question just relates to the issue of whether or not this property will be strated, or if there is a body corporate, and I'm asking this because of the question raised by Councillor Patterson. So do we have a sense of how this property will be titled? Each unit a separate title, or will it be one building?
Through the chair to the councillor, so the condition 4 4 of the application, of the recommendation for scope of approval, that they're not to be individually titled through a building format plan or otherwise. So it'd all be under a single title.
Okay. Well, yeah, and that gives me some level of comfort given the issues with the one in Varsity Lakes where development compliance became very, very difficult because we didn't know whether we were sort of pinging an individual lot owner or the body corporate, and the interests of the on-site manager were often at odds with the interests of the lot owners. Those are my only questions. Thank you.
Councillor Pauline Young.
Thanks, Chair, and through you to Nathan or Roger. The communal areas, we've got reasonably or very tight conditions so that if this was something that's going to advance, to condition that they remain that way. We don't want to see them turning into an additional rooms down the track because it's worked so well and it's accommodating students going forward. And then the other thing is those bigger rooms, which I think Councillor Forster's had that issue in his area as well, is that a room that sits 2 or 3 occupants has been divided and leased out separately. So I would like to think that if this is something that eventually gets supported, that it's conditioned tightly so that what we see here on the plan is something that's going to be delivered going forward, especially seeing as they don't have open space. We need to know that the communal space for the students is maintained at what we see here.
In answer to that, through the chair to the councillor, there is no specific condition limiting that the communal space can't be converted, but any change would be a change to the application and would require a further either change approval or a new development approval.
And basically the only way we'd become aware of that is if a student came up and said, well, I haven't got a theatre or something anymore. So there's no conditions to actually say that what is put before us today is going to be there in 2 years' time or 3 years' time.
Through the chair, that it would be the approved plans condition, or approved drawings condition that would limit the use of it to only what's been approved in the drawings package.
And I would like to say I have confidence in that, but I don't, because we see so many homes built these days where the garage is turned into 2 additional bedrooms and they complain about on-street parking. So we know that that sort of thing does not come to our notice very often. Thanks.
It's fine, that's a comment, it's not a question. Councillor Owen Jones, we might see this as the final question before we come to the motion.
Fine, thank you. So I was just interested in knowing whether or not we have, as a committee, any flexibility in, so that they've effectively asked for additional height, but they're also asking for less car parking, and there's clearly been a series of negotiations that have happened at the officer level in regards to adding another basement. Whether or not we could add a 3rd basement, I think was maybe a bridge too far, but could we change the mix of the car parking and remove a level of the building? Who wants to have a go at that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think if that was the desire of the committee, it's probably more a refusal rather than a condition, because it's changing the development too much, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you.
I'd agree with that. Councillor O'Neill, so you did raise before that you had a change recommendation you wish to put forward, so I'm happy to take that now. So we've got it up on the screen and then we can see if there's support for it before we get into debate.
Okay. And first of all, I do apologise for the length of this, but I'll have to go through it. My change recommendation reads, it is recommended that Council resolves as follows, that Council refuses the issue of a development permit for a material change of use, impact assessment for rooming accommodation or student accommodation for the following reasons. 1, the development does not comply with the strategic framework of the city plan as follows. A, the proposed development does not comply with strategic outcome 3.3.2.1 in brackets 8, as the development exceeds the height identified on the building height overlay map. B, the proposed development does not comply with specific outcome 3.3.2.1 in brackets 9 as follows. 1, proposed development does not deliver a reinforced local identity and sense of place, given the development does not provide a design that adequately reflects the local character. 2, the development does not provide a well-managed interface to nearby development and is not within the reasonable amenity expectations of nearby residents, given the inappropriate setbacks and bulky building appearance. 3, the development does not contribute to an ordered local skyline given the increased height proposed and the appearance of the building. And 4, the development does not provide an excellent standard of appearance of built form and street edge. 2, the development does not comply with the purpose of the medium density residential zone code as follows. A, the density proposed does not comply with overall outcome 6.2.2.2 in brackets B as follows. 1, there is insufficient capacity within the existing infrastructure network to cater for the additional vehicle traffic. And 2, the built form of the development exceeds the height identified on the building height overlay map and is not considered to provide for an appropriate building design. 3, the development does not comply with the purpose of the General Development Provisions Code as follows. A, the development does not comply with Performance Outcome 2 and Overall Outcome 9.4.4.2 in brackets 2 in brackets A, as the development is likely to cause an amenity impact to the surrounding area as a result of increased traffic generated from the development. 4, the development does not comply with the purpose of the Transport Code as follows. The development does not comply with Performance Outcome 1 and Overall Outcome 9.4.13.2 in brackets 2 in brackets E in brackets 2. As the car sharing scheme proposed by the applicant has not sufficiently demonstrated that the parking demand generated by the development could be accommodated within the subject site, and the likely utilisation of an on-street parking would not be consistent with the community's reasonable expectations for a development in this context. 5, the findings on material questions of fact are: development does not comply with the relevant assessment benchmarks. There are no matters which warrant approval of this application despite non-compliance pursuant to section 60 in brackets 2 and brackets B of the Planning Act 2016. And conditioning compliance is not possible, as doing so would result in major changes to the development pursuant to section 60 in brackets 2 and brackets D of the Planning Act 2016. And 6, the evidence on or other material on which the findings were based are the common material, the assessment benchmarks, observations made during site inspection and matters prescribed by legislation, including but not limited to the Planning Regulation 2017. And I'll speak to it if you...
So I have a change of recommendation to refusal from Councillor O'Neill and a seconder from Councillor Peter Young. Councillor O'Neill, to you to open.
Thank you, Chair. We've heard a little bit of the history of this application, and if you look on page 688, you'll actually see an image of the original proposal, which of course was not accepted by our planning team, and they worked over the next 3 years with the applicant. Can I say that the applicant wasn't what I would call very hastily in coming forward with changing the application? And look, that could be for several reasons, but at one stage I'm pretty sure that I was actually asked to delegate to the city manager, development manager, for a refusal. The rideshare scheme came in at the 12th hour, and yeah, so that doesn't give me much joy in thinking that this will be a success, this development. I just want to talk about my reasons for refusal to really go with whether we really need to approve a 50% uplift for this building. We have worked with other applicants nearby to make sure that their buildings are absolutely beyond. You could not actually say that there was not a decent effort put in for the appearance of the building. In my opinion, this development doesn't constitute an excellent standard of appearance. The no balconies, for instance, and I know that in the report it says something about there's a risk assessment with student accommodation having balconies. Well, I know of one along Bermuda Street that's been there for years that has balconies, and as far as I know, there's been no incidents. I think that usually with the university students, they're adults. I just don't get that argument, I'm sorry. And it certainly does not meet the amenity expectation for residents in the area. This is a medium density residential area. The zone code states for rooming accommodation more than 4 unrelated people, density does not exceed 1 bedroom per 133 square metres. This development is proposing 1 bedroom per 5.5 square metres. So you can understand why nearly 200 people in the vicinity objected to this development application. And can I state here now, as with Councillor Gates's comment, we certainly do need student accommodation throughout the city, but it has to be the right site and it has to be the right provider, and we have to have some surety of that. What I've heard today, there's no surety of who is going to run this, who is going to be the organiser or the management group to run this student accommodation building. And a very likely touch on the Southern Cross Uni benefiting from student accommodation in this area. I get that, but there's been no commitment from that university either. Again, I don't have much confidence in how this is going to work. And I guess the elephant in the room, of course, is the parking. We've got a four-hour regulated parking area around where this application is coming forward. It is, and please don't say that students don't drive cars. They do. I don't think the ride share is going to cut it. I think it's a very dangerous practice for council to be depending on the transport code for, not for rooming accommodation, but for student accommodation. I think we're in dangerous ground, setting a precedent to do that, and I would hope that this committee does refuse that just purely on those grounds, because as I said, we could be in a world of trouble in this city. As I say, no on-site management, no agreements in place. I'm just asking, and there's plenty of reasons for a refusal, I am asking the committee to support me on refusal. Thank you.
Well done. Thank you, Councillor O'Neill. Councillors, anyone else wish to speak for or against on this one? Councillor Young.
Very briefly, Chairman, thanks. I think Councillor O'Neill's encapsulated all of the arguments very well there, and I'm happy to support the proposal that's before us. I just wanted to reiterate the comment that's been made that we certainly need student accommodation, and it's unfortunate that we're in a position where we're having to refuse this. Thanks, Chair.
Anyone else, councillors? In that case, we'll take the vote on Councillor O'Neill's. So, do you wish to close, Councillor O'Neill? Are you happy to leave it?
Just to say, I really appreciate the support, because I think all councillors realise this is very important to our city, student accommodation. We have to get it right.
Debate is closed. We'll take the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimous. Thank you, officers. Committee, forgive me, I have offered a courtesy to Councillor Castro. He has a preset appointment at one of his schools to get to, so So, councillors, I'm going to bring forward 6.5, and I'm hoping to deal with it quickly so that Councillor Castro can get in his way and those officers can be discharged as well. So, Councillor Castro, you have some questions for officers, I believe. Cool. So we'll wait for the officers to get into the room, please.
Are you looking for a seconder to your moving it, Chair?
I'll let the officers get to the podium first, and we'll get to that. No. Oh, I don't need one. Okay. Councillors, there is a presentation, but I haven't had a response from anyone seeking the presentation on this one, so no need for presentation. Cool. I'm happy to move the officer recommendation. Councillor Owen Jones seconds. So we now have a motion on the floor, but I'm happy to now go to Councillor Castro for his questions.
Thanks, Mr Chairman, and I certainly won't be opening my remarks with Councillor O'Neill's closing remarks, but I'd like to thank the committee for their support, because clearly there's not a lot already. It's moved before I even had a chance to eat my last bit of pear on the plate, but there we go. But all right. Look, I do actually have concerns with this application. I've spoken at length to the adjoining, or one of the adjoining properties. But to cut a long story short, There are two main issues, but one of the other issues, and we can't do much about it, is you actually look very, very closely at this application. Well, you don't need to look that closely because it sticks out like the proverbial dogs. But there is a duplication on both sides where you've got basically two living areas, which is rather unusual.
Councillor Lecastre, if I can interrupt you for a minute, do you have a question for the officer before we move into debate?
I do.
Can we get to a question?
I can frame this as a question, or I have to. But basically, is this unusual to actually have a kitchen and a laundry and on both sides of the house, so two living areas, because there is a concern about this actually being, anyway, that's a question.
Through the chair, it is somewhat unusual to have two kitchens and laundries. However, the development has been conditioned to ensure that it can't operate as a dual occupancy. One portion is kind of more of an entertaining portion of the house with a large butler's pantry, formal dining, tea room and a maid's quarters. So it's kind of the entertaining, and the other portion is more of the everyday living for this dwelling.
No, look, Yeah, okay, so that was, but there are two main questions. One is the concern about the flood zone. So I would actually like to know whether there's any possibility of actually moving back so from I think it's about 18 metres from the riverfront at this point in time. But of course the pool, the spa area is all built in that flood zone. There is a concern from the neighbour about the impact that area, and also the fact that, as I say, there are like the two wings of the house. There's like a barbecue, which is only about 2.9 metres from the fence. So with the pool there, etc. Whether this could be moved back further, can we condition this in any way to actually pull that, say, the pool area, the spa area that's in the flood zone back from the water?
Through the chair, the waterway setback line is 9 metres. The pool is at 9.1 and the dwelling is at 18 metres. So officers don't have an ability to pull it back or ask for it to be back any further.
Further to that, through the chair, our hydraulics team has looked at it. So conveyance, where the dwelling is, it doesn't affect conveyance. Flood storage, we can probably go through some drawings if need be, and Alicia can explain further, but they have accommodated flood storage. It's elevated. There's ability for flood storage beneath the building and within a tank. So hydraulics has really been accommodated in the present proposal. So there's no real ability, technical reason why we should ask for it to be set back further.
Councillor Castro, any other questions on this one?
And given that everything else has basically been moved to the absolute extremities of the setbacks, is that partial third storey is obviously an outside entertaining area, and the concern is that that could actually be moved closer to the fence line, to the property at number 12, I think it is 16 to 20, 12 to 20, 12 to 16, sorry. Is there any condition that we can put there to make sure that balcony can't be extended further to the south, I think it is?
Through the chair, the rooftop terrace is currently set back 13 metres to the boundary.
13?
13 metres to the boundary, so at the outermost projection. So this will be stamped approved drawings plan condition. So if they were to change that, it would require a change application. And then officers would assess it if they were to extend that rooftop terrace out any further towards the side boundary.
So it's not something we can condition now, but if they did, they would have to come back with a new application.
I think, Councillor, the sealed plans is the condition. Yep. So if they build outside of those sealed plans, then development compliance gets involved, and they'd have a choice then to either come back to the sealed plans or
I was
to
hoping
put an application.
that we may be able to condition it now, but you're saying...
No, so sealed plans is the condition in terms of what they can and where they can build it.
Yeah, sure. Okay. That was, look, basically, I was really hoping that there might be an appetite from the committee to do something with that. But if you're saying that, there's no way we can condition those, they were the main two concerns. But
so, Councillor Vorster,
thank you very much.
Your question?
I like the look of this building. It's almost like the Avengers head office, and I'm expecting Tony Stark to take up residence. But Councillor Lecastro does raise an interesting point with respect to the kitchens and the laundries. And I just had a question around which would prevail. The council condition that there only be effectively one family residing at this property, or moves by the state government now to grant, almost as of right, the ability to have dual occupancies. I don't think the state's been all that transparent with where they intend to land from a policy point of view, but if the state did come, which would prevail?
Through you, Mr Chair, that's a great question, Councillor Vorster. The state policies is really around residential zone sites. This is in the limited development zone in the Carrara-Merrimack floodplain area. So the state planning regulations wouldn't actually apply to this site. So in answer to your question, our condition 4 would prevail.
Great to hear. Could I just ask, given the zoning, what is the likelihood that short-term accommodation uses could be expected in this area?
Through you, Mr Chair, limited development zone, highly unlikely. The planning regulations that the state have recently rolled out are more for your low and medium density res zones.
So have we been silent on that issue and relying instead on the planning scheme, or is there an opportunity for us to explicitly within the conditions prohibit the use of this extraordinary development for short-term purposes?
Through you, Mr Chair, they haven't applied for short-term accommodation. Short-term accommodation is a land use under our city plan, so if they're carrying that out, it would be a development offence.
So my question is, in our proposed conditions of approval, are we silent on the issue of short-term accommodation, and would it be unreasonable for the sake of the community to clarify our position that this development is supported on the basis that it's providing housing and not the Ritz-Carlton Junior?
Through you, Mr Chair, we have been silent on prohibiting short-term accommodation, but condition 4 does say that it must be used as a dwelling house only. And we also say that the dwelling house shall not be used as a party house. So we have somewhat answered your questions.
Councillor Vorster, could I seek clarification just quickly? But since they haven't requested that as part of the application, do we actually have a lawful right to apply that condition?
Through you, Mr Chair, in our opinion, it wouldn't be reasonable to actually impose conditions. For consistency, we'd have to do it with every MCU application that we resolve for consistency.
Though, in all fairness, Mr Chairman, I acknowledge the point that you're attempting to make, but in that proposed condition of approval, we have said that this ought not to be able to be used as a party house. Now, did they apply for a party house use?
Through you, Mr Chair, we actually specifically put that condition on because there are a number of submitters that actually raised that in their submissions.
Right, so I don't see how it's reasonable for us to attach an anti-party house provision but not take it one small step forward and say that by party house we mean all short-term accommodation. And I think that it's an important distinction to make because definitions change all the time. We have historic approvals that had talked about family accommodation. That no longer exists. So I just wonder, is it genuinely all that unreasonable to say no short-term accommodation, given that we've already gone 90% of the way there by saying no to party houses?
Through you, Mr Chair, we'll leave it at that. Officers don't believe it's necessary, but we'll leave it up to the committee to decide.
And invite Councillor Vorster if he wants to maybe look at changing the recommendation at full council to...
Well, I'm happy to... do we have a mover?
We do.
Oh, we do, okay.
Yeah.
Could I just say, and I understand the angst around short-term accommodation, but if somebody's going to spend $100 million building a mansion on the side of the Narang River, it may not be that, it might be more, but and Julia Roberts decides that she wants to come and stay on the Gold Coast for 3 months there, is that the short-term accommodation that you're afraid of, or?
Well, as long as it's not during lockdown. But if it were 3 months and 1 day, she wouldn't fall afoul of the short-term accommodation provisions. I'm concerned.
Okay,
that
so
that
Charles and Camilla come for the 2026 Commonwealth Games and they're staying here. Look, it's a shadow that I don't think we need to be boxing out for this application.
Okay, councillors, we're in debate and I haven't opened it, so we'll leave that there. Councillor Pauline Young, do you have a question?
No, that's a straw. Sorry, Mr. Chairman, point of order. He did ask a question, and I deserve an opportunity to respond to it if you've accepted the question.
Make it snappy.
So I have no problem with properties being used on an ad hoc basis for short-term purposes, but I do have an issue with properties being put on the short-term accommodation market, and that is the outcome that I'm seeking to prevent in this instance. So I accept and I congratulate city officers for picking up on the risk that party houses pose to residential amenity. All I'm merely attempting to do is to make sure that we use a slightly broader definition to give us some security moving forward. But I think ad hoc use for the likes of Julia Gillard, not Julia Gillard, she's been a very gracious former Prime Minister, I might say. So this isn't a partisan DA. I have no issue with. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Pauline Young.
And thank you through the chair. More of a comment than a question on the two bathroom, two kitchen thing is that I do know of having Hedges Avenue in my area where there are substantial homes where people have spent a lot of money to this size that are come in under that because they have a staff that looks after their house, and the staff is at one end of the house and the rest of the house is for the family use, and if the family's is overseas, it's a staff thing. So it's not something that you're going to say, let's have a busload of schoolies from, say, LA coming here to celebrate. I think it's more along the fact that a lot of these people, well, not a lot, but people who are building and investing that amount of money in a property of this size, chances are they're going to have support staff that will be living on site.
Thank you, Councillor Young, and we'll take that as debate open. So we have a motion which has been moved by me and seconded by Councillor Owen Jones. I don't need to speak to the item, but Councillor Castro, did you wish to say anything more on this item at this time?
No, thanks, Mr. Chair. I just appreciate the chance to actually raise those concerns and see if there was anything we could do to condition to appease the immediate neighbours. But I do appreciate Councillor Vorster taking the other issue a bit further.
Does sound like there might be something more there to talk about.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move an amendment.
That's cool. What's your proposed amendment?
That was it, condition 4. Well, my amendment would be, as per the city officer recommendation, but the words party house or party houses be substituted for short-term accommodation.
Officers, how many particular conditions need to be altered with that wording?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't believe any other conditions would need to be modified.
Yep. So just condition 14, Councillor Vorster? 4C, sorry. So we'd change party house to short-term accommodation.
Yes. So, well, I would assume that a party house use is a subset of short-term accommodation.
Exclusion of state legislation.
Sure, as party house or short-term accommodation. And importantly, a question really, this doesn't actually alter the development approval because they do not have a right to operate it as short-term accommodation. They need to lodge a fresh DA. So this doesn't affect them at all. But what it does do is give confidence to the neighbours that there absolutely has to be a fresh DA. So is that correct? Mr Chairman, through you to perhaps Roger, if you're happy to.
That's correct. Councillor Owen-Jones, as seconder, your thoughts on the amendment to the motion?
Support it.
Councillor, so Councillor Vorster, as the mover of the motion, I'm not going to accept it either. I'm happy for you to have a go afterwards, but we'll let the original motion that's seconded.
Sorry, Mr Chair, he just needs a seconder for his amendment.
Yeah, that's right. So if we can have an opportunity to ask if there's a seconder.
Is there a seconder for Councillor Vorster's proposed amendment?
Can I seek leave as a non-committee member to...
No, which is where I was getting to.
I suspect this is more because you were new as a chair, you might not know.
I suspect this is a full council amendment and not one that's going to get supported today. So if there's no seconder for the amendment, then it lapses. We go back to the original motion.
Some are more red-coloured, some are more grassroots.
Yeah. Well, the property's big enough for 500 cars to park there.
Oh, there we go. Parking. Yeah, there's another issue.
Councillors, yes, the original motion as per the officer's recommendation. Okay, so the original officer's recommendation moved by myself, seconded Councillor Owen-Jones. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Councillor Vorster, you wish to be noted? No. Councillor Castro, I'm guessing you're going to take leave of us now?
Thank you to you, to Councillor Vorster and not the rest of you. Thank you very much. Meeting at All Saints.
Okay. Councillors, we'll go back to our original path now, so to 6.2. Councillors, we recognise the fabulous David Jansen in the room, who I'm sure has an enthralling presentation for us. I'm assuming, councillors, so I was interested in the presentation on this one. Is there a general agreement for the presentation? Very good. All yours, David. Yes.
Excellent. Thank you, committee and councillors. Back to item 6.2, which is a development application for a material change of use for short-term accommodation, food and drink outlet, bar and function facility at Lot 6 Entertainment Way at Oxenford, also known as the Movie World Hotel. Officers are recommending approval subject to conditions. This is the subject site. We have the development footprint, including the car parking changes in red and just a general indicative building outline in blue. The subject site obviously includes the various village roadshow theme parks and tourism attractions on the site, including Wet and Wilds, Movie World, Outback Spectacular and Topgolf, as well as the film studios. The site is in the major tourism zone, which quite clearly anticipates major large-scale tourism developments, as well as ancillary uses, such as those proposed. Here is a couple of perspectives of the development. So the proposed development includes the 22-storey and 79-metre high hotel building, which contains 600 two-bedroom units, as well as all your associated hotel amenities, such as pool, gym, so on and so forth, as well as the bar and restaurant, which would be accessible to the public as they're a separate land use. and the function centre in the foreground of the right-hand image, which is 16 metres in height and also has outdoor deck and lawn areas for the functions. And the function centre has a GFA of approximately 2,000 square metres. Okay. This site plan shows the layout of the development, including the new and upgraded car parking areas. The proposal also includes a new pedestrian bridge directly to the Movie World entry. The development is well set back from the northern boundary of the site where the closest adjoining residential uses are. This helps mitigate any of your visual or direct amenity impacts. The key considerations of the proposal are discussed thoroughly in the report. Just noting for the purpose of committee today that the building height, the 50% uplift provisions of the strategic framework do not apply, as the site is not within an urban neighbourhood. It's identified as a theme park in the strategic framework mapping, which in turn anticipates, as I said before, major tourism development to support the existing theme park. So whilst the development does exceed the current mapped building height overlay of 27 metres, the higher order outcomes of the city plan do support the increased height and scale as officers have assessed. So this is just a car parking layout diagram showing on the left-hand side is the existing car parking areas, including the sealed areas in blue. And on the right-hand side is the proposed development showing where the development footprint results in the removal of some of those existing sealed car parking areas. So at the back there in zones E, they're adding new sealed car parking, notwithstanding that there's still a total loss of 415 spaces due to the development. And also noting that a total of the 2,000 or so spaces are grassed overflow spaces. They're to be maintained, and council officers have looked at the applicant's traffic management plan that deal with the management of that grassed overflow area and made a few recommendations which is within the conditions. Just a further zoomed out image of the total car parking supply across the site, which is what council officers used as assessment. We've reviewed their car parking demand and supply report and determined that the proposal does meet the city plan, as the car parking supply is expected to meet the peak demand for the site. Notwithstanding this, officers, as a result of some submissions received, officers did take a close look at what potential impacts there could be from overflow parking in terms of off-site parking, but officers, we found it very unlikely that any impacts would occur due to the location of the site and the inability to, I suppose, park nearby in a way that would affect businesses or nearby residential areas. Just a floor plan of the function facility showing its layout. Also on the screen are the recommended hours of operation, which we've closely considered, and they're embedded in the relevant condition in the decision package. And also detailed within the report were the 26 properly made submissions, including a few in support. We've reviewed those issues raised throughout assessment and when preparing conditions, but didn't believe any further wholesale changes or refusal should result from those submissions. Thank you. Any further questions?
I might kick off with the first question and then go to Councillor Peter Young, but I noticed in the submissions there was concerns about the clearing of trees for the development, but I couldn't work out where that actually would occur in this. Is that because there was a different version of this originally and it's changed since then?
There are some landscaping trees that are proposed to be removed, but nothing of environmental value. So there was no concerns whatsoever from council officers in regards to vegetation removal. There is some amendments required to the banks of the existing saltwater creek. That's just to improve flooding and hydraulics through the area, which should benefit the entire catchment. But there's basically, in straightforward terms, there's no environmental concerns whatsoever on the site.
Yeah, can I ask a follow-up question to that?
Yes.
At least one of the submitters was concerned about koala habitat being lost. None of the trees that are in the car parking area that is being removed are actually koala habitat, are they?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Yeah, so I think that there's been a little bit of an extension of the truth in regards to the loss of koala habitat when the area that the proposed built form is going on is effectively the asphalt car parking that exists at the moment.
Councillor Peter Young, your question?
Thanks, Chair. My first question was about the trees that are to be removed from Zone E, and if that was the case, that's where you're anticipating the trees to be lost along the frontage there. They're pretty substantial, and they were introduced some years ago in a deliberate attempt to create a visual amenity barrier, might say, or component, and I am unhappy with that being removed. Do they really need to be removed? Because they're quite close to the front of the site. What sort of car parking would we lose if those trees were retained, please?
Through the chair, there would be some removal along that immediate frontage.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily what the submissions are about, but in regards to that, they have got a statement of landscape intent, which I can shoot back to, which officers considered was an overall improvement for the site. Just sort of looking at Zone E there, pointing to item 10 on that one, there was proposed to be, I suppose, where they're taking out the existing trees to put the sealed car parking in, they were replacing it back with some landscaping, which, and in addition to that, the overall car park is, I suppose, officers would consider to be of a high quality, as it's got the landscaping built into the car park at the wheel stops.
So could you let me know before council how many car parking spaces would be lost if we actually retain those existing trees along the frontage? Thank you. I understand that there's no anticipated use of the car park that's already approved on the northern side of Saltwater Creek and Cops Road. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that's correct. That piece of land, which is immediately north, I suppose, of the red box, the development footprint there, it is owned, as we understand, by the same entity that owns the Village Roadshow site, but it wasn't included as part of this application, and there's been no proposal to have
reliance upon that.
There.
Good. Yep. I used to be the representative for all of Oxenford, south of Michigan Drive, so all of that red hashed area. So I'm conscious of the community concerns about some acoustic impacts upon them in the normal operation of Movie World, particularly the high-performance vehicles that are used for the cop show and the squealing of tyres, which occurs a few times a day. Is the building likely to reflect any of that noise? I know there's been acoustic reports done. Has that been a particular matter of attention? Any noise generated from the site possibly being reflected back to the residential areas, please?
Through the chair, it wasn't in their acoustic report. Their acoustic report focused, I suppose, on the proposed development being the function facility in the hotel and what potential impacts that would have. Yep. It didn't include anything in regards to potential changes to the existing noises from Movie World.
Could you take it on notice to have a look at that particular thing? Just from an officer's perspective, our acoustic people might look at that, the generation of noise from the site and how it might possibly reflect back, because we wouldn't want to intensify any impacts in the area nearby. Also, in regard to signage, is that a thing that we can address now? Because there's been some pretty garish sort of signage put up in this vicinity for the Top Golf and I think the Green Lantern ride. I mean, these are enormous signs and not necessarily great. And I see the signage on the building itself here, or the V there for Village. Is there any other proposed signage that we're aware of?
Through the chair, not through this application. Any defined advertising device would need separate approval through local laws.
Right.
However, I believe in the past, as an overall visual amenity and design issue, officers and potentially obviously the committee could apply a more specific condition regarding any future advertising devices and any requirements for that the subsequent local law application would have to deal with.
Finally, Chair, about Saltwater Creek, I mean, the original approval for Movie World was made in the mid-1980s, and I think the conditions of approval were on the back of an envelope. You know, there was just... A foolscap page, you think?
Foolscap page.
Pretty limited, and Saltwater Creek is a fairly significant environmental value, or it should have it, and I just wonder if there's any attention to that. You did mention hydraulic function, but I'm more interested in the environmental function, because in the vicinity of their property, it's largely been damaged over the years by one bit of development or another. It'd be nice to see a bit of TLC for the creek in that vicinity.
Through the chair, definitely. So as part of their works to the banks of existing Saltwater Creek, which is a flood conveyance creek, obviously, they are proposing some rehabilitation to the banks, obviously including additional ecological vegetation. So that's all part of it. They propose that as, I suppose, an offset to the creek work. So we would anticipate that through that future environmental management approval, we would definitely see some both visual and environmental benefits to that creek there. And that diagram there provides a brief visual of that.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. So I'll just consolidate there. I'll expect some, or we might get answers from you about the Zone E car parking, if they're to retain the existing trees, and then the acoustic impacts. Thanks.
Certainly.
I had Councillor Gates first and then Councillor Owen-Jones.
Oh, thank you very much. It was just a question in relation to Councillor Young's query about the trees along the frontage. I'm very familiar with those because I actually caught a member of the community cutting some of the branches off one day, and I stopped and had a conversation with him. So they're pretty scrappy, but I just wondered if it was the officer's belief that, is it hedging that we can see along there and that it would provide a better screen for the new car parking?
So through the chair, this is just the statement of landscape intent, I suppose, which provides a concept for the landscaping. At this stage, in 10 there, it is just listed as edge screen buffer planting. We can have a look at exactly what they proposed.
Well, if it was a solid sort of buffer to the car park, it would be, in my view, a superior outcome to what's there now with the new car parks behind it. But if we could have a look at what type of planting that is, I won't be at full council, but the other councillors, I'm sure, could consider that should we be able to get more information on that.
Certainly, and probably just further to that through the chair, we'd anticipate it would be an improvement. As we probably know, most of us drive past this site, it's a lot of mature, very tall vegetation that's completely visually permeable through. So getting a bit of a balance in terms of on-the-ground screening would be a benefit, despite the loss of potentially some of that more mature vegetation.
Thank you.
Officers will take that as an action before the full council meeting to provide a memo to all committee members and non-committee members just on that particular landscaping strip, and I'm hoping that there might be a couple of the visual renders of the site that maybe pick up what its intent to look like is. Councillor Owen-Jones, your question?
So my question is really not dissimilar to Councillor Young's in regards to the interaction with the Cops Road property also owned by Village, and the currency of that existing approval. My understanding is that it's still on foot. It was resolved through a planning environment court action.
Through the chair, I wasn't around for the original approval if it was a court approval, but it is still valid. However, it was a superseded planning scheme request, so not a full development approval. So they would need to subsequently come in under that superseded planning scheme request for a full assessment, essentially, but it only permitted a 6-storey, about 27-metre high hotel building, which the applicant has indicated to us they don't want to.
We're a bit lost.
Through you, Mr Chair, there is another MCU for a car park on Copps Road. That's not the subject of this application. As David has said, that is still valid, that car park MCU application.
Yeah. So can I ask about, if you don't mind, Chair, the interaction of that MCU with this? That MCU, one of the conditions required a pedestrian linkage across Saltwater Creek, but that would have required state government consent and approvals, and I don't think that that's been received. How would that interact with these? Do these approvals and the rehabilitation areas supersede those earlier approvals?
Through the chair, the unfortunate part about it is Movie World can have many MCUs over their site and other sites. That is a separate MCU, not part of this application.
Yep.
They do still have a live application that hasn't lapsed for a car park, but not the subject of this application.
Okay, so this actually doesn't prevent that pedestrian linkage happening because it's happened after. Okay, so, in regards to the proposed 20 special event type nights, I don't have a problem with them, provided that we are able to manage any complaints regarding, in particular, acoustic issues. How do we manage? How will we practically manage complaints from the 20 special event nights?
Through the chair, I might just call in our environmental health officer, who's the acoustic specialist on this one, but essentially this was something we did look very closely at, and officers obviously consider that 20 business days is a reasonable amount for the major tourism zone in the site of this size. We've asked the applicant to provide forward notice of 10 business days to all the residents in that area, as you've probably seen, so that there's some forewarning and service on their behalf. But I might just get Peter Lindsay to go through the potential complaints process if there is complaints received about the function facility.
Through the chair, if there were to be complaints, the area would be licensed also through liquor licensing. So in lieu of any conditions that are placed through the development approval, through complaint registers, things like that, the complaints would initially go to liquor licensing, who would then deal with the complaints. If there were to be conditions placed on the development approval, the development compliance would then action those complaints.
And do we have a requirement for them to keep a register or anything along those lines of complaints?
It's not within the condition itself at this stage. We haven't included that yet.
Sounds unreasonable. So I think we've explored this previously. I think when we were looking at the Kira Hotel, we looked at similar type of conditions. Yes. So for the 20 special events, are they restricted to being inside the building, or can they be external to the building as well?
They can be external to the building on the lawn area at the rear of the...
And there's a time frame of...
Till 10 p.m.
Till 10 p.m.
Yeah.
Following on from that, Chairman, if you don't mind, those 20 special events are in addition to the other special events that are permitted within the theme park itself?
Through the chair, correct.
Yes.
Yeah, the 20 special events for this DA would be specifically for the function facility, land use. Any other events for late night stuff in movie world or anything is separate to that and not part of this application.
So how many special events would the local people be noticing per annum, do you think?
Through the chair, it's actually probably just going further into that. It's in the major tourism zone code. There's an acceptable outcome specifically for Movie World, Village Roadshow site, that talks about the acceptable outcomes for the site for noise. I can probably point to that in the report.
I think the most impacting of their special events involves fireworks quite frequently, and I wonder if there's any provision for them to have to notify the local community in advance of those.
Regulated by the state.
Through the chair, that fireworks displays are managed through the state, and they have to, as part of their permit, to notify residential surrounding as to that area, that the state would have to determine that through Mines and Energy.
And further to that, through the chair, AO 13 of the zone code specifically states the hours of operation for the rides, and then it also states other activities occur occasionally and may operate outside of these hours where A, notification is provided to council 10 business days in advance, and B, they comply with the relevant acoustic objectives. So it's built into the city plan currently.
So if we didn't, could I ask, if we didn't have a number of 20, they would still have to go through a process to make an application to the city 10 days in advance?
Correct, through the chair, correct.
Yeah. So can I just say, in regards to noise and amenity issues, very broadly, I think that the community of Oxenford accepts, after 30 odd years of trading, that the movie world performs an important function for that local community. It provides an enormous amount of employment, and I think that there's an overall expectation that there will be activity on site. It's just wrestling with that interface between what the residential community are prepared to accept and that economic generation of activity. So I don't know whether or not the answer lies in a number less than 20, for the special events, which would still allow Movie World at a future date to come back and have a conversation about extending it. So, because once we give the 20, it's hard to regulate it back. But if it was, for example, 12, which is once a month, and then maybe by exception. So if they needed to do 15, they could make an approach to the CEO under the code that already allows that to happen. So,
other questions for officers at all? Okay. So one further question quickly. I noticed in the submissions there was concerns from a submitter or submitters around loss of economics for existing businesses and restaurants in the area. There was also submitters who were concerned with the opposite. But can I just check, the restaurant offerings and cafe offerings that will be part of this facility, they are open to anyone in the public to come to, aren't they? Not just specifically?
Through the chair, that's correct. They've applied, we believe, specifically for bar and food and drink outlet in order to allow the public to come into the hotel, whether it's probably the rooftop and the front bar or whatever it is, and enjoy the facilities.
Cool. Thank you for that clarification. If there's no further questions,
so I'm aware. So I'm interested in exploring the 20 and moving it to 12. And how would we go about doing that? Is there a need to change one of the conditions?
Through the chair, correct. We could, if that's what the committee required, we could. It's a fairly simple change to the conditions.
Councillor Lawson.
Well, as we're exploring it, just how reasonable is that to cut 50% thereabouts of the activation for what's essentially an economic asset as much as it is an accommodation asset?
Through the chair, I suppose it's an open, I suppose it's a fairly subjective matter, and it's a broad town planning issue. Officers arrived at 20 through some discussions with the applicant, and on balance, I suppose it was less than, it would be less than every fortnight that residents may expect noise from this. So that was a reasonable figure, and the applicant also sort of indicated 20 was sufficient for their
And so, like, that really interests me, because if 20 is reasonable from the city officer perspective, I don't see how 12 can also be reasonable, and how we didn't err on the side of submitters if 12 was reasonable. Because it seems as though we might be chasing at shadows.
Through the chair, I suppose it is open. Officers could have applied no conditions whatsoever and not simply allowed Village Roadshow to operate it as they please, but we did arrive at that figure through some consideration of the overall zone code, its intent, the higher order strategic outcomes of the city plan, and obviously some of the concerns raised by the residents.
So, Mr Chairman, I mean, although I indicated a desire to move this item in support of the city officer's recommendation, I will always give deference to the local area councillor, because, you know, that's my approach. So, but I am interested, though, in the defensibility of going to 12, and I'd just like a better sense of how robust our process was to arrive at 20 in the first place, because I think if you can go from 20 to 12 and call it reasonable without really outlining, you know, examples of precedent or actual, like a framework of decision making, then we might end up in a situation where we approve 12, but then the applicant appeals, and then we end up with no cap at all. So, apart from negotiating with the applicant, did we have regard to precedent elsewhere? And, you know, what did that look like?
Through you, Mr Chair. Sorry, in a couple of parts of that question, Councillor Vorster, I don't know if there's any precedent elsewhere, because this is sort of the first application of this nature we've received. Like any application, it's an applicant-driven process. They've proposed these events, they've been assessed by our officers, and I guess that's the level of assessment that occurred and resulted in a recommendation that the 20 events be approved. So that's what was proposed, what was assessed. So I can't tell you what a court might do.
So I'm confident we've interrogated this particular point enough.
Can I just clarify? This is special events. This is outside the built form. So it doesn't prevent the convention portion of the building being used 365 days of the year. This is what happens on the greens. This is where, you know, we're going to protect the lifestyle of the adjacent residents. We actually need to do some things every now and then to do that.
So Councillor Aaron-Jones, it's in your area, and I was going to come to you to see if you wanted to move the officer's recommendation or look to change it. Which way would you like to go?
So I'd like to move the officer's recommendation in its entirety, with the exception of the special events being for 12, which is effectively one per month. And I have to say that, so condition 12, changing from 20 to 12.
So I'm happy to accept that as a change, the recommendation, if we can change that first and then get a seconder to it, which Councillor Peter Young is happy to second. And while the Minute Secretary changes it, we'll open debate.
Yeah, thank you. So just in regards to the special events and in regards to Movie World, they've actually been a really good, I'm going to say, corporate citizen in the time that I've been an elected representative. They actually contribute to the community through employment, but they also are pretty reasonable people to deal with. The black and white of an approval is 12, if that's the mind of the committee and the council. But in my mind, it doesn't necessarily prevent the operation coming back at a future date and seeking more if things have worked out okay. You know, so I think along the way we just have to strike that balance, and I don't think it's an unreasonable balance. the building itself is a significant investment in the tourism output of this city, and there's been, ever since I've been a boy, there's been talk of hotels at Dreamworld or hotels at Movie World, and there's been several applications and several approvals, but I think this is probably the closest this city's going to come to having one of our major theme park owners in the north investing in a hotel outcome, and they plan to run it themselves. They're a successful operator of the Nara Resort north of SeaWorld, and they were going to develop that same model here. And I think that given the importance of the film industry to the Gold Coast as well, having this type of accommodation immediately adjacent to our premier film studios makes a world of sense as well. The height of the building initially is pretty challenging because it is actually a significant building adjacent to the M1, and without a doubt that's something that I think both the officers, myself and the community have paid a fair amount of attention to. I think the chances of a second building at this height turning up on site are next to nil. This is effectively our opportunity to make sure that they build something that works for a hotel operator. My understanding is that a shorter building would have created an even larger footprint and had an even bigger impact on car parking. So I think I can accept the fact that it has to be the height that is proposed. The impacts on amenity, there's been some submissions, not a lot in the scheme of things, but some submissions, and there was concerns in regards to visual amenity and impacts on neighbours, and I think that the distance from the hotel to the neighbours, some 250 metres, is kind of manages that. There are no external balconies. The building is shaped in a form to try to help alleviate some of the reflection that might come from it. There was some concerns from the community in regards to the visual impact of lights, and I think the officers have managed that as well. So overall, I think that it's a significant investment in the north. The report talks about some $300 million worth of construction cost. I think that was maybe when it was submitted. There's been a little bit of growth in the cost since then. And to me, the idea of providing an approval that isn't contingent upon the application for the Cops Road site, car park site going ahead, I think that's important to the local community. So I think overall it hits the right spot.
Speakers for or against? Councillor Gates.
Chairman, I had my hand up for a question before debate opened, and I would like to simply pursue that if I could. Am I correct that the officers said about the number of special events that more than 20 could be approved with an application to council?
Through the chair, I'll just go back to that AOPO 13 of the major tourism zone code, which is already in there. That is correct. They could do that under the acceptable outcome. I suppose officers' view would be that because of the specific conditions on this DA, that the conditions would override that for the function facility, so they would be limited to what we condition, as the DA would be the most relevant approval over the land.
Okay, I'm interested to know how Councillor Owen-Jones has been impacted by noise complaints, because before you answer the question, I'll tell you what I was going to suggest, that if we limit it to 12, we do so with proviso that any additional special events be the subject of an application to council. If you had, but I don't know the
Through the chair, I will just
volume of.
I will just say something quickly. the special events under the acceptable outcome have to comply with a different noise criteria to what we're permitting under the development permit special events. So under the recommendation for this DA, they have a different, higher noise level permitted for the special events as opposed to the AO. So there would be some difference there.
Well, I'm sure limiting noise is your ultimate aim.
So if I could answer Councillor Gates.
Sorry.
The challenges that we have for the special events like Fright Night. And my particular concern was in regards to the activation of the lawn space for special events.
Okay,
in addition
I'm happy to support
the numbers
you.
that already happen, but I'm also not opposed if they get to 12 and there haven't been complaints that they can go through a process of actually seeking approval from the CEO for more, if that, or the council as a future application. So,
okay.
So it's kind of a bit of a mix. I haven't spoken to Movie World directly about how important the number of 20 may or may not be to them, but 12 was the number that we struck for Oxenford in regards to allowing for blasting for the quarry once a month. You know, we're dealing with potentially the Fright Nights and the White Nights and all of the other things that may happen, and then how does that impact on the grass and special activity? So,
thank you. That's fine.
Speakers for or against? Councillor Peter Young.
Thanks, Chair. I think Councillor Owen-Jones has spoken pretty comprehensively about the proposal, and I agree with much of that, and I'm happy to support the proposal with the change of, or the reduction of special events to 12 in the conditions. I do have one, I certainly welcome this investment. It's going to be a very significant building that we'll see on the approach to the Gold Coast from the north. The main concern I have about this is any reliance in the future on that car park on the north side, which is not part of this application, but clearly part of this application is to take out 415 car parks, and I've seen that car park really full many, many times, and I know that's all anticipated and they think that it can be accommodated. But my concern is that there will be reliance upon that car park that has been approved on the northern side of the creek, and it is a real choke point trying to get across the creek there on a single lane bridge, and it would be a really significant addition to the traffic snarls in the area in peak hours. Obviously, a lot of people coming to the theme park and leaving from it, their timing coincides with normal peak hour, so that's the main concern I have about this proposal, and the loss of car parking on the site. Other than that, I'm supportive of it. Thanks.
Take that as a little bit for, a little bit against. Yep. We have another speaker, Councillor Gates.
But that car parking is not the subject of this application, is it?
No, but they could use it.
Okay, so I just want to make the comment that I'm fully supportive. I think this is a really good indicator of our city's growth and the success of the theme parks in this city. I also wanted to acknowledge that Village Roadshow were exceptional right throughout the COVID period in supporting new development at their sites across the city and using that time to keep investing in the city for the betterment of each of the theme parks. And this is just the icing on the cake for me. I think this will be a fantastic addition to Northern Gold Coast, and one that everyone will really admire.
Thank you, Councillor Gates. I'm going to quickly speak in favour of the item. I think Councillor Owen-Jones has touched on a lot of it, but for me, there was some incredibly interesting detail and numbers on page 236 and 237 around the economic impacts of this investment, where not only $300 million plus upfront in construction, but the longer term benefits that in the first 5 years it would create 500 jobs, which is around $100 million in salaries. Contribution to tourism, so within a projected 876,000 customers in the first 5 years, creating an expenditure of 840 million. The function facility, 130,000 attendees in the first 5 years, creating 125 million in expenditure. And then importantly for me is the last one, the supply chain contribution. that existing businesses already based all across this city, from Yatala to Coolangatta, will benefit from this investment to the tune of 60 million in supply chain uplift in the first 5 years. Interestingly too, on page 237, where it talks about, and this wasn't a figure that I was aware of, that 1 in 2 conferences held in Queensland are held on the Gold Coast. We have heard continuously from the former GGC and from members of that how important that conference space is, or apparently it's referred to as MICE activity, meetings, incentives, conferences and events. But 1 in 2 of those held in Queensland are happening on the Gold Coast. And that growth is going to continue, and that can't all be accommodated in our existing facilities and existing sites. So seeing this site take up that as well is welcome, and will be a huge addition to that part of our tourism and conference market. And I was just going to finish by finally saying that obviously, given the scale of this and where it is, it's had an incredibly thorough investment from officers, and to thank David and Roger and the team on this one for the assessment and the recommendation. Councillor Owen-Jones, do you wish to close? In that case, we'll take the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Thank you, officers. So we'll go to 6.3 now, 77 Pullman Street, Southport. We welcome Liam and Lara up to the front. Liam, we have a short presentation on this one.
Sure.
Keyword short presentation.
I'll keep it short.
Short.
Through the chair, agenda item 6.3 is in relation to a material change of use for multiple dwellings at 77 Pullman Street. The application is subject to impact assessment as the building height exceeds the mapped height under the building height overlay map. So here we see the subject site. Councillors, it's in the medium density residential zone. The site is in proximity to the Southport State School, Owen Park and St Hilda's School. It's also nearby the Southport Priority Development Area to the east, and within 600 metres walking distance from a light rail stop. This is the aerial view of the subject site. So the site's within a residential area that is I guess reflective of the transition toward more medium density residential outcomes. This is the proposal that we see on screen. It's as I said, multiple dwelling, 31 2-bedroom units and 4 3-bedroom units, equating to a total of 35 units. It's 9 stories, 29.5 metres, which exceeds the mapped height of 23 metres for the site. There's a combination of at-grade and basement level car parking. This slide demonstrates the city plan parameters which apply. So as I've said, the site's subject to a building height overlay of 23 metres. There's a residential density designation of 1 bedroom per 50. It's in an urban neighbourhood. It's also in the light rail urban renewal area, specifically the transition area. So the key consideration for the proposal, councillors, relates to building height. As I've said, it does exceed the mapped height. However, because it's in an urban neighbourhood, it's subject to the 50% uplift provisions. Officers have determined that it meets all the relevant provisions of that test, namely that it reinforces the local identity and sense of place, provides a well-managed interface to adjacent properties, and it provides an excellent standard of appearance. Another key consideration relates to car parking. So the acceptable outcome for parking supply requires 45 resident spaces and 6 visitor spaces. The applicant is seeking a performance outcome whereby 35 resident spaces are proposed, along with 2 car share spaces for residents and 5 visitor spaces. In relation to the proposed car share spaces, the applicant selected to use the travel demand measures within AO 4.2 of the Transport Code. Under this provision, one car share space equates to 5 residential spaces. The proposal includes 2 of these, which equates to 10 spaces. So as the proposal seeks to establish 35 standard resident spaces and 2 car share spaces, this is equivalent to 45 car spaces, which meets the amount prescribed under the acceptable outcome of the Transport Code. So officers are of the view that the proposal therefore meets the car parking demand as prescribed by City Plan. Regarding visitor parking, there's a shortfall of 1, but we're satisfied that is appropriate because of the site's frontage. It can accommodate 1 on-street car parking space. The development's also within the Southport traffic area, and the site is within 600 metres walking distance of a light rail stop. In relation to public notification, a total of 4 properly made submissions were received and 1 not properly made. All were in objection, concerns related to building height, setbacks, car parking, construction activities and shadow impacts. Officers have taken these matters into consideration throughout the assessment and are satisfied the proposal meets the relevant requirements of City Plan. So in summary, councillors, the proposed multiple dwelling is reflective of the development pattern anticipated or intended for the area, and it meets all requirement relevance of City Plan and the strategic framework. Officers are therefore recommending approval subject to conditions.
Questions? Councillor Owen-Jones for a question.
Could I just ask, through you to the officers, is this what is often referred to as the missing middle?
Through the Chair, I would say this is reflective of that dwelling typology, yes.
That was all, Councillor Owen-Jones. Councillor Gates for a question.
Yeah, if I may, about the car parking. With the 35 resident spaces, would they be allocated to a specific unit? Or, I mean, I'm just wondering whether people would have the option of living in a unit with a designated car parking space or not, if they were going to use the light rail.
Through the Chair, it's uncommon for developers to pool car parking. Often they do, when you purchase a unit, you would purchase it with a car parking space or without. Right. However, that's not regulated through the conditions.
And this particular development, it is anticipated that the units would be sold, not kept in the ownership of the developer?
Through the Chair, the developer may choose to hold and rent these products, or they may choose to sell them.
Okay, thank you, that's all I need.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Yeah, this is the missing middle, and have us increasing this type of development is really important in this area, and that's why I've supported so many of your DAs that have come through and not brought them to committee in this area. But if you could just speak, my concern is regarding the ability to support further developments in the future with the 0 site setbacks. Can you just talk about the impact of that on the neighbouring properties' potential to develop in the future?
So, through the Chair, this is an image of the ground floor plan. Are you referring to those parts of the building that are along the northern side or the top of the screen?
Yep, basement and the sides.
Yeah, so the basement is built to boundary. Mm-hmm. That's common for these type of developments. With regard to the northern side, the developer is required to do some level of, I guess, fill. However, we've considered the interface with the adjacent premises. We don't consider that it unreasonably impacts their amenity, and I don't believe it would affect their ability to ever develop their property. Okay,
thank you. And with the parking, in the last application that we just saw that had an issue with shared parking, officers noted that they were comforted by the fact that they knew that there would be a single owner to manage that. This applicant has developed other properties in the area. They don't hold, they do sell. So we are looking at a significant number of owners, and we also have high transition of ownership in that. Given that in the last application you said that that was one of the reasons that gave you comfort for the public, for those shared spaces, is there not a concern that we have 35 different units all having to agree at body corporate in terms of these uses of 2 card share spaces, which take out 10 of a supposed 45?
Through the chair, the management of those car share spaces is a matter for the body corporate and any future operator. I guess our assessment is based on the contents and what is in City Plan. City Plan contemplates this outcome. Therefore, that's how officers have reached the recommendation in support.
And just on that parking element again, can you confirm that the original application was, it didn't have any consideration of card share spaces, and that there was a report presented on parking and off-street parking which officers did not accept as accurate, that was presented by the applicant?
Through the chair, yes, that is correct. The car share scheme was added within the decision period after a number of information requests. As part of the original application, the applicant just proposed standard car parking arrangements that resulted in a shortfall of the acceptable outcome. Officers requested the applicant increase the parking supply. In response, the applicant did some survey work of other developments that they've had in the area. Officers had issues with those surveys and were not supportive or in agreement with their findings. So we continued to request the developer increase the parking supply on the site. In response to those requests, the car share scheme was proposed.
Councillors, any other questions for officers on this one? Okay, so Councillor Patterson has alerted me beforehand that she has a proposed change of recommendation she wishes to put forward. Obviously, she's not a committee member, so she'd be looking for a committee member to put that up. I'm going to offer her the chance for those words to come up on the screen and for committee members to decide if there's anyone that might be willing to move that particular recommendation.
I'll do that, Chair.
Thank you.
So Councillor Young has seen it, so it looks like we've got a mover. So Minute Secretary,
I'll second that.
Minute Secretary, we've got Councillor Patterson's proposed words. That's all right.
Would you like me to read them out, Chair?
We'll let them come up. It's
Okay.
yeah. So I didn't realise that everyone's seen a copy of these words. Okay, so
And they.
Councillor Patterson, if you want to run through them quickly, so not word for word, but if you want to run through the intent of your proposal,
Yep.
I guess.
Okay. So, as I mentioned before, this committee members here would know that I do not bring development applications to this committee very often. There have been significant numbers of applications for this particular area, and the reason why I work through those with officers at a DA level before they get here is because I know how important it is that we meet these accommodation targets for these growth areas. Rarely, actually almost never, am I entirely happy with what we go through with at a DA level, but I recognise how important it is for the area. The reason why I am seeking a refusal for this one is because I'm so interested in the growth in the area. And by taking every an inch at every aspect, 0 setbacks, minimum not meeting the bedroom sizes, a car parking strategy which really has no integrity in it, to be quite honest, given what were the original applications, and is just a way of getting past it. This causes problems, which means that we cannot approve or that we're creating conflicts and problems for ourselves in the future. So the recommendation identifies that it does not provide a well-managed interface to nearby developments, given the inappropriate setbacks and the building appearance, and that it does not meet excellent standard of appearance in street edge. It is quite attractive from the front, but effectively is a wall on the sides. I need more developments of scale in this area. If we let them come through where they're too much, it's going to cause problems. We consistently have issues in Pullman Street in parking already as it is. Also in this document, it identifies the likely cause to amenity impact to the surrounding area as a result of increased traffic generated from the development and the likelihood of residents having to park on the street. So the applicant has also not sufficiently demonstrated that the parking demand generated by the development could be accommodated with their off-street and on-street parking proposal, and it certainly would not be consistent with the community's reasonable expectations for a development in this context. So I'm a big advocate for building in these areas. It is essential, but my concern is if we do it when they've taken it too far, then it really it creates roadblocks, it creates problems, and it creates conflicts for future applicants and developments and the community. I'm also very concerned about this shared car parking, which was not a strategy at the outset. And for 35 units, a lot of these people will be first homeowners, to be then responsible on a body corporate to consistently assess as there's new in and outcoming owners to identify who gets what, really is setting up, it's just setting up future problems to deal with. And that's why I'm seeking refusal by the committee. Thank you.
Councillor Young, you moved the motion, so I forward you the opportunity to, if you wish to speak, to open on top of Councillor Patterson's open.
I'll be very brief. I am a bit uncomfortable with moving such a drastic change from the officer's recommendation. I did review the material before that Councillor Patterson provided. She said that officers had assisted in the wording of that, so I felt that that was a reasonable thing to bring to you. I am a bit agnostic about the development, to be honest, and although I've moved it, I am not yet convinced. Thanks.
Councillor Vorster, did you wish to speak at all?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My primary concern with this particular development is how close it is built to boundary, and how that may prejudice the ability for adjacent landowners to be able to deliver a comparable product while enjoying some level of amenity for those future residents. So I would have much preferred seeing an outcome where there was some amalgamation of an adjacent site and decent setbacks to preserve the property rights of the adjacent developers. And I think this is I don't want to call it opportunistic, but obviously the proponent is seeking to maximise their yield and the economic return on this particular site. But I don't think it's actually in the interests for this emerging community. I'm very uncomfortable with the notion of pooled car parking. It's something that I've fought against in my own patch. Yeah, it can be argued that it affords more flexibility in terms of managing demand and supply, but also think it provides insufficient certainty to future owners or renters around car parking availability, and we might end up inducing more traffic or vehicles into the precinct than we imagined, because there might be some expectation some could be available, whereas it would be a stronger position for us to say that there is only one space or two spaces available, and that's what you have to live with. So on that basis, and because I always back the local councillor, happy to support Councillor Patterson.
Thank you for your contribution, Councillor Forster. Councillor Gates.
Chairman, I'd like to foreshadow the officer recommendation, but if I can start by speaking against the amended motion. I think in looking at the streetscape surrounding, it's predominantly units and it is a changing area, as is the desire of City Plan for that to occur because of its proximity both to the Southport CBD and, of course, to the light rail. I think that our city is changing and not every family will have a car anymore. You know, it's costly, and I think this sort of development lends itself to people who will use public transport into the future. But the major thing that bothers me is that the officers have told us this morning that this complies with City Plan, that it meets the requirements of City Plan. We've never ever before been in such a situation in our city with such a shortage of accommodation. And this is exactly the type of product that we are being encouraged to deliver in areas that already have existing services, facilities and public transport. So whilst I would like to support the divisional councillor who is intimate with the area, I just feel that the 2 car share spaces can make up for the limited shortfall in parking, and that there will be an appetite from buyers for a unit without car parking. I think it probably ticks all the boxes.
Thank you, Councillor Gates. Councillor Bowden-Lumsden, you look keen to jump in? Have a go.
Thanks, Chair. Just on that point, Councillor Patterson's raised the point of we understand there's need for accommodation and we want to be, this is the kind of spot where we want to be seeing this kind of scale of application because there is a need for housing. But the concern she's raised around parking, we understand that we're trying to make the shift away from cars, but people aren't just going to go from families having 2 or 3 cars to all of a sudden none. There's going to be a transition period in that sense. I'm sure if this application had another dozen car parks as per the acceptable outcomes, there probably wouldn't be concerns. Well, would be less concerns. The setbacks issue, as Councillor Forster and Councillor Patterson raised, is also a factor, that it could prejudice the neighbouring properties in terms of delivering a similar yield outcome moving forward. As for the need for accommodation, I was just, I guess, grimacing with myself because the committee about an hour ago refused 120 odd student accommodation. Yep, precisely. And this is for likely people who will be long-term living on the Gold Coast, whether they're long-term renters or purchasing the property, whereas the student accommodation, they would be people who would, I would imagine, be more likely to be transient or would be looking to have that as a temporary accommodation option until they decided to permanently take up residence on the Gold Coast in something perhaps like this, when they've established themselves with an education at a university, got a job, perhaps purchased a car that they'd need a car space for. I completely understand we need accommodation. We need to be providing infill in places like Southport, right next to the CBD, but if they're all going to have these kind of issues, we're just causing grief to the city that we don't need to cause.
Councillor Pauline Young.
And thank you, and through the chair. I am unable to support what Councillor Patterson's put forward there, and very much coming from the same areas as Councillor Gates. Yes, it does meet our city plan requirements, and also people aren't ever going to change their behaviours at all if we keep just demanding of the industry and demanding of the land that we have no more of, and we have no more street frontages. So we are now starting to condition these buildings as such. We've got 35 units here. Yes, there are people that aren't going to choose to purchase a car because they may rent one of those units off somebody while they do their 3 or 4 years of accommodation, 3 or 4 years of university here, living on a light rail corridor that will take them out to our biggest university. I'm not sure by numbers, here on the Gold Coast. Griffith is the biggest university, so they are going to accommodate themselves there. They are looking not to have to purchase a car. A lot of our international students are looking not to purchase a car. So we have to have a really good mix of accommodation here on the Gold Coast. And as been stated, this is that missing middle. This is the potential. When some of our own students go to Melbourne to study, whatever area they're studying in, majority of them do not, and when you speak to the university students, they don't purchase when they're down there a car, and they don't go and purchase a unit. They're studying for 3 or 4 years. There's good public transport, and it delivers them to the area that they're studying in, delivers them to the area where they are recreating, or delivers them to the area where they're CBD and things like that. So I think time and time again in these reports it says we have to have a good mix of accommodation coming forward, and I believe this is a good type of accommodation in this area, delivering people to wherever. If you are renting in that area, if you are purchasing that area, it is incumbent upon you as a purchaser to purchase something that suits your needs. And if you are a 3 or a 4 car property owner, property owner, and you purchase a 2-bedroom unit, you're not going to get delivered 4 car spaces. So the market will quite often dictate where people purchase and what's available to purchase. So if I was a car, I had a family and had 3 or 4 cars, would I go and purchase in this area where potentially there's only one available car space? So I think the developers are meeting, as been said here today, what the city plan demands of this area. It's met the AO and PO compliancy side of things, or approval side of things. It's incumbent upon us as members of the planning committee to ensure that we are addressing all parts of accommodation in the city. And yes, we do need student accommodation. That was a past one, but this one's delivering 35 car spaces, plus it's delivering 2 ride share car spaces. The officers have indicated there's a visitor's car park short, but that's available on the street out the front of this building. So I think if we are true to what we are trying to deliver here in the city, then we have to deliver that mix going forward. And whilst I'm reluctant to not support the local area councillor, I just think it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we're delivering a good mix going forward. Thank you.
Thank you for your contribution, Councillor Young. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, and I think this is a really good debate, and I know we have talked about the student accommodation, we're talking about consistency, and we've really got to be mindful of the parking. I know we can turn around and say people will buy and we're going to change the parking, the habits of travel around the city, but the amount of applications we bring to the city and the amount that we actually put through, when we bring a application of concern to the table, it's because we've got a real concern at that particular point. I think we really need to be consistent in 2 factors. We did have a conversation down south about student accommodation, and we're now having a conversation about accommodation in Southport. The reality is there is a shift in this city, and we've all seen the shift, but right now it's important that we just don't throw out every car spot that we have in this city right now, because down the track we'll be looking for car spots, and there'll be a group of councillors sitting here looking back at a group like us saying if we'd made a different decision back 10 years ago, we would have a different outcome. So I am supportive, not that I'm on this committee, but it's really important that when an application comes to this committee, I believe there's a real concern at that particular time, and they're the times that we need to ensure that we're sending a message to the developers as well, that they don't just have an open blank foresight under the performance outcome. And performance outcome is our challenge. So, yes, thank you.
And we look forward to one of your sons continuing the Taylor dynasty in that future.
Grandson.
Future
grandson.
Councillor O'Neill, you have a contribution?
Look, I think that as a council, we haven't actually investigated how car share is going to work, whether it be student accommodation, whether it be in the residential zoning. And I just, when I saw this, when I read this item first up, I was absolutely gobsmacked that they're actually putting forward a car share situation when there's only 35 units and they're building boundary to boundary. I just thought that I do admit that I concur with Councillor Patterson that they want too much, and it will cause problems in that area.
Yeah.
So look, you know, I'm going to support the change recommendation. Yep.
So I think we've heard from everybody apart from Councillor Owen Jones. Did you want to enter into debate at all on this one?
No, I don't need to, thank you.
Okay, so we have a proposed change recommendation from Councillor Peter Young, and that was seconded by Councillor Vorster. Councillor...
You can defend me, I'll post.
Forgive me, I keep forgetting to come back to close. Councillor Peter Young, would you like to close?
Thanks, Chairman. No. But you might want to hear from Councillor Patterson. You may not. That's your discretion. I'm happy for her to close for me.
I'm
Thanks.
only conscious of time. If you'd like to defer to Councillor Patterson for a very short close, then I'll accept it.
Thank you, Chair. I will be brief. No, I will be brief. I will be brief. I am the strongest advocate for increasing population in this area. It makes so much sense. I have dealt with DAs, with our officers for years, and consistently work with them and the developers to get to an approval before it gets here, because I respect developers' time. I know that that is money, and I make sure stuff doesn't come to this committee meeting unless it is critical. The reason why I'm seeking refusal is because I see so much value of increasing the population capacity in this area. Anyone who goes down Pullman Street now will know the parking issues there. It is a tiny little street. We need to make sure that developers recognise that they don't get carte blanche on the on-street parking now, which effectively is what this development does. So I am seeking refusal. Thank you.
Thank you. So, recap again.
Is that closed now? Was that the close?
Yes. Yep. So, change recommendation moved by Councillor Peter Young and seconded by Councillor Vorster. We have a foreshadowed motion from Councillor Gates to revert back to the officer recommendation. Everyone's had a chance to contribute, so we'll vote on the change recommendation now. So, all those in favour? Division? So, Councillor Hamill, Councillor O'Neill, Councillor Vorster. Against? Councillor Gates, Councillor Owen Jones, Councillor Peter Young, Councillor Pauline Young. So the motion is lost. We will go to Councillor Gates for shadowed motion, which is the officer's motion.
Thank you, Chairman. And I won't say too much, but there's been a couple of comments about a previous application today, and I would like to suggest that this is very, very different from the one we considered earlier, which had a very significant shortfall, some 50-odd or more car parks and 17 car share spaces. So quite different from what we have before us, which is 35 units with 35 with the 35 car parks and the 2 car shares to pick up the slack of 10 spaces. I also want to clarify that I heard the question asked about the setbacks, and I heard the response that there would be no problem presented by these built-to-boundary setbacks that they would not inhibit in any way the development of the other two sites. So I just feel that we need to support the officer's recommendation here, primarily because of my belief that if we were to refuse this, it would be resolved in the first appeal because it complies with exactly the intent of our city plan and exactly the intent of the Southport area, which is our priority development area, and this is outside it, admittedly, but it's exactly where we want to see this product, this type of product delivered. What hasn't been considered today is older people as well, who want to remain in the area that they've resided in, and there's no doubt that there's a lot of elderly people that have resided in Southport for a long time, and with a mum who's just transitioned into not driving and needing to move out of a larger home, I think we should all be mindful of this sort of product being really suitable to older residents who want to stay living within their community, but perhaps in something that's more manageable without the need for a car park. So for all of the reasons mentioned and for the fact that we are so desperately short of accommodation in our city and we want to deliver more, I think the limitations put forward today don't outweigh our approving this application.
Thank you, Councillor Gates. Councillors, do forgive me, I didn't get a seconder before Councillor Gates opened there, but Councillor Owen-Jones has seconded the foreshadowed motion, which is the original officer's recommendation. I gave everyone an opportunity to speak on the last motion, so if everyone's happy, I'm just going to call the vote on this one. I think we've all had a contribution on this matter. Any dissent to that? Cool. So all in favour of the foreshadowed motion? Against? Motion's passed. Councillors, we've been at it for a little while and we've got 2 items to go still, so we're going to have a 10-minute break and then we'll come back for the last 2 items. last couple items dealt with. So for the minute secretary's information, for committee's information, Councillor Peter Young has just had to leave the meeting to attend another matter on behalf of the whole of the city for a while. So he has left the room, but he will hope to be back with us as quick as he can. Question, Councillor Vorster?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, was there a presentation on this? Not that I have an appetite for one, but I was just trying to understand
words out of my mouth. So there is a presentation, but I was going to get an idea from committee if there was a desire to see the presentation. No. Okay, so straight to questions then. So we're on item 6.4. Questions for the officers? Only that I need a committee member to want to see it. Yep, okay, so, yeah.
Item 6.4 is in relation to a development application for a material change of use to establish a childcare centre at 62 Cotloo Street, Ashmore. The site's in the low-density residential zone where childcare centres are listed as impact accessible. The subject site has an area of 2,500 square metres and is currently improved by a dwelling house and landscaping. It is a corner allotment that fronts two high-order roads, being Cotloo Street to the north and Wardour Street to the east. Officers note the roundabout at the intersection is currently being upgraded to a signalised intersection, with works to be completed by 2025. More broadly, the area is within the Ashmore locality. It's surrounded by residential development, and it's also surrounded by some commercial uses, industrial uses, and business areas of Southport and Bundall. The subject application seeks to establish a childcare centre that has a maximum capacity of 91 children. It has a building height of 2 stories and 9 metres, a site cover of 36% and 29 car parking spaces. This slide shows the ground floor of the development, which includes the site access location, car parking and landscaping areas. This slide shows the first floor, which includes the 3 external playscapes. There's 5 activity rooms and an inner play area. This level also includes perimeter landscaping at the sides and rear, as well as 2 metre high acoustic barriers around playscapes 2 and 3, which are illustrated in red. The key considerations for the proposal include the protection of suburban character and amenity. So officer assessment has concluded the proposal achieves an appropriate outcome because the building has an attractive building design. The building height, site cover and setbacks achieve compliance with the provisions of the zone code. The building's well separated to adjoining dwelling houses. It includes appropriate acoustic attenuation measures, and landscaping is provided that softens the built form and car parking areas. Another key consideration related to the traffic impacts associated with the development, where the applicant submitted a traffic impact assessment which was reviewed by officers. It was found the development does not generate significant impacts on the safety and efficiency of the road network. Officer assessment has also determined vehicles can safely enter and exit the site in a forward gear. So the low density residential zone also includes provisions relating to small scale standalone commercial uses. These are contemplated where the use does not have a size that will undermine existing neighbourhood centres. It will provide direct service to the immediate neighbourhood. Development maintains a compatible scale and form to nearby development and does not detract from local character and amenity. Officers are satisfied that the development meets the prescribed tests. The application is all, because it's impact accessible, we've also considered relevant matters. So as part of consideration of childcare centres, it's commonly considered that economic need and impact is a key consideration for those uses. In this regard, the applicant submitted an economic need assessment, which officers had peer reviewed. It was noted The findings noted that there is presently a need for 89 spaces within the catchment. This is representative of a modest level of economic need. It was also found the proposed centre would not impact the viability of other centres within the catchment, and that the centre would provide increased choice and competition, which would support parents and caregivers. So accordingly, officers found that the economic need and impact considerations support the proposal. We've also considered the locational attributes of the site. It's located on a corner lot that is well separated from neighbouring dwellings. It's located on the corner of two high-order roads that see over 20,000 vehicle trips per day. The site's also in close proximity to major employment areas such as Southport and Bundall. Having regard to these factors, officers have concluded that the subject site is like a logical location for a childcare centre, and the impacts of the proposal have been appropriately mitigated. In relation to public notification, there were 54 submissions received, all in objection. 21 were not properly made. Concerns related to economic need, character and amenity, traffic and parking, and acoustics. These concerns have been considered, and officers are satisfied that the application meets the requirements of City Plan notwithstanding. So therefore, the officer's recommendation is to approve the development, subject to conditions.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Vorster.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This development reminded me of two developments in Division 11. One was the Silkwood School, which was proposed to be constructed on a busy roundabout, and this is a busy roundabout, at least for the moment, before it's eventually signalised. But it also reminded me very much of the childcare centre that council refused at the end of, I think it's Rangeview Court and Maddox Road. So I've got experience in dealing with applications like this, and I find myself asking the same questions in this committee as I did back then. Could I just get a sense from city officers around how it is that we assess economic need? Because it's not economic impact, but economic need that has been presented on the screen. So is it purely a subjective criteria that city officers develop during the assessment process, or is there a framework or a set of considerations that we apply consistently between different DAs?
Through the Chair, there are no provisions in the City Plan in relation to childcare centres that require consideration of economic need. We've considered economic need as a relevant matter because that's what the Planning Act would like us to do in the circumstance of an impact assessment application. In this circumstance, the applicant has submitted an economic needs assessment which considers need and impact. That's the common, I guess, industry standard for assessing these considerations.
Is it though? I mean, can you point me to the standard? Because merely saying, and I don't mean to be argumentative, but when I think about economic need, I'm thinking in terms of economic activity. In other words, the need to create jobs, the need to support jobs, not to put 89 kids in childcare over the next 10 to 15 years. So is there a standard for assessing economic need with respect to childcare centres? And if so, where can I find that standard?
Through the Chair, there is not a prescribed standard. If we were to only consider the relevant assessment benchmarks that City Plan has or has, we wouldn't have to consider economic need or impact. So in that regard, the proposal meets all of the requirements of City Plan and therefore should be supported.
It doesn't, because we're required to look at all relevant matters, and you've determined that economic need has to be one of those relevant matters.
Correct.
Right. So I'm not quite sure if I read your point correctly, but just on need, I'm of the view that the assertions of submitters should always be contested by city officers, right? And quite often, if some representations are being made to us about traffic impact, for example, we will test that by internally doing a bit of research and speaking with our own city officers who work in that space. I recall with the childcare centre at the corner of Maddox Road and Rangeview, there was also a case that there was an economic need to provide X number of places. But I did the work of checking with every childcare centre within a radius, I think it might have been 1.5 kilometres, to see whether they had vacancies, because these developments are approved with effectively X number of places. That's again tempered by federal regulation. But I mounted a persuasive case that there were actually, I think, 300 additional spaces swirling in the system within the catchment, and therefore that need did not exist. So given your presentation talks about the impact on childcare centres and there being a negligible impact, does that mean that city officers contacted those childcare centres to see how many spaces they had available, if any?
Through the chair, city officers did not make contact with any other childcare centre operators within the area. That's not within our purview to do so. We received an economic report from a qualified economic consultant or an economist. We had that peer reviewed, and the findings were as they're presented in the report, demonstrating that there is a need for 89 places in the catchment.
But is there a need, is that need over and above the approved number of places within the economic catchment?
Through the chair, I'm sorry, I don't follow that question.
So I'm trying to understand, okay, well, let's break it down. How large is the economic catchment? Okay.
Through the chair, this was the catchment defined within the economic needs assessment.
Right.
Again, this was peer reviewed and it was found to be inappropriate for that assessment.
Okay, so in this entire, and sorry, I don't have my glasses with me, but can someone help me out with that intersection far to the west? So that's from between Mollendina, effectively, right? So what's that, midway through Mollendina, or can I say to the western end of Mollendina? Anyway, let's just say from Mollendina to the Broadwater, from Chevron Island to, what, the hospital, right? There is a need to where, sir? So one of the bases for approving this as a relevant matter is economic need, and that's being supported because in this entire catchment, there is a need to supply 89 additional spaces.
Correct, and that's advice, again, provided to us from an economist.
Right. Okay, so what would happen, so how many spaces are proposed here again? Sorry? It's like
91.
Sorry?
91.
91. So if this childcare centre were to be approved by committee, would there be an economic need to deliver another childcare centre in this entire economic catchment?
Through the chair, that's a hypothetical and I'm unable to comment on that. We'd have to consider that as part of any other future application.
Right, well, I actually take that as an answer. Thank you. Could I get a sense of what work was done from a transport perspective to establish that there could be safe ingress and egress from the site?
Through the chair, the applicant's traffic engineer submitted drawings which demonstrated the site ingress and egress arrangements, paths, so on and so forth. They were reviewed by city officers, and our traffic engineers internal to council have advised planners that the arrangements are safe.
Okay, but safe for pedestrians, safe for motorists, safe for vehicles queued in the driveway?
Through the chair, safe by the relevant engineering standards which apply.
Okay, and do those engineering standards assume that traffic will navigate through that roundabout at the prevailing speed limit, or does it make an allowance for speeding through the intersection?
Can I just add that the signals are being installed at this very moment?
That's great, but
they'll be there by the time this is constructed.
if it's constructed.
I can't because I'm not a traffic engineer.
No.
But again, so Chris will.
I'm very familiar with it, yeah.
Mr. Chair, so as Liam mentioned, a traffic impact assessment was prepared for or in support of the application. So Cotloo Street is the frontage by which access has been taken. By nature of the centre median on Cotloo, the access will be left in, left out. So the applicant has proposed a left turn deceleration lane to afford drivers the ability to move out of the through travel lane in order to then turn into the driveway. That was triggered according to the warrants of Austroads and therefore proposed. That turning lane itself has been designed to, so the road frontage is posted at 60 kilometres per hour, and the design is to a 70 kilometre per hour standard, which is kind of typically what they do. They'll design it to 10 k's above the posted. In terms of speeding through the soon-to-be signalised intersection, we can't, I don't think, reasonably assume that drivers will break the speed limit.
I guess what I'm trying to understand is whether these standards, which talk to safety, presume that, or assume, I should say, that all drivers adhere to the posted speed limit, or does it make some allowance for the fact that there may be some unsafe drivers?
Well, in terms of the works proposed for the application, being the left turn lane in, absolutely, they have designed to 10 k's above the posted speed limit.
And on the driveway itself, I don't think that I saw any separated pedestrian path in and out. I think it was just to drive in and drive out, or was there a separate pedestrian path?
There is a separate pedestrian entrance off Cotloo. It's to the, correct me if I'm wrong, but it is to the east of the proposed access driveway.
Okay. And my last question, is the current VXO, is that considered safe under the current standard? And the reason why I ask that is one of the submitters, I suppose against the development, furnished me with some images of walls being kind of struck down due to vehicle accident and what have you. So I'm trying to get a sense of whether it's presently not a safe situation and will be made safe should the development proceed, or whether we have a case where even something that meets the current standard is still practically on the ground unsafe for motorists and for pedestrians.
Presently on the site, it's a dwelling house, and,
Yes.
and so the standards prescribe different requirements for a dwelling house to, say, a childcare centre or a commercial development. So the existing vehicle crossing is being upgraded to a standard that is suitable for two-way access into a commercial development, and it is safe in the sense that it meets the relevant design requirements.
Sure, but and I get that for the person who lives at the home, but the images that I've seen suggest, and I'm not an eyewitness to the accident, but suggest that people speed through this corridor, and at times they strike the fences and the brick walls, I think, and they're knocked over, and that carnage unfolds sort of on the VXO, but also across that footpath. So would you regard the current layout of the VXO and the footpath and its proximity to this intersection as being generally safe under the standard? Or if we were constructing a fresh dwelling house, would things be a little bit different?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I could just clarify, so we're talking about the existing situation, not what is proposed as part of the childcare centre. I have not reviewed the existing situation in detail because that's not the proposal. The proposal is for a new access design intended for the purposes of a childcare centre.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, thank you for that. Councillor Taylor, question?
Yeah, thank you. There's discussion that there's going to be change of traffic conditions. Has this assessment been assessed on the current conditions or on the proposed change And is there a difference in relation to the conditions, in relation to the impact of that property, if it was approved as a childcare centre?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the design of the access has taken into consideration the proposed signalisation of the intersection. That has been reviewed by Transport and Traffic Branch through this assessment process to ensure that the two will work together and marry up to be a safe and appropriate outcome considering the future situation. One of the great things about providing signals there is that it does actually afford breaks in the traffic flow on Kotlu, which then I think makes it easier for parents to turn in and out.
Councillor Gates first, then Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a question. On page 455, there's a photograph of the site. Am I correct that the site is, the two neighbouring properties both have tennis courts that abut the property boundary, basically?
Through the chair, that's correct.
So both the one to the west and the one to the south, those two properties both have tennis courts there?
Through the chair, correct.
Thank you. Thank you. That's all I want to know. Thanks.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. First of all, back to safety, and this may be a question for our transport officer. A separate expert, Mr. Adam Pickle, advises that the turn-in is non-compliant and substandard against the Austroads Guide to Road Design Part 4A. Says that the deceleration distance is not sufficient under either a 60k or 70k consideration and will adversely affect local traffic safety and operations. Could you respond to that expert's opinion?
Thank you. So through you, Mr. Chair, the Austroads design guidelines provide two broad criteria for design. One is called normal design domain, which is intended for greenfield areas and new intersections in greenfield areas. The other is extended design domain, which is intended for brownfields, built-up areas with an existing road network with associated constraints that when you're trying to retrofit turning lanes and intersections into those, it provides different criteria to meet, and that's what the applicant has used, and I think the opposing TIA has assumed greenfield requirements, but certainly Austroads upholds extended design domain as safe and appropriate for this circumstance.
So if I understand correctly, if this site, if there was nothing on this site and these roads at the moment and we were going, then you would, and it was greenfield, you would be proposing that it is not safe and it adversely affects safety. Is that correct?
Greenfield would refer to like up in a new section of Pimp.
I understand.
There's no
I understand. I understand. Yeah. So in that case, you'd be saying that it's not safe.
In that circumstance, what I would be saying is Austroads upholds a different standard.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I do. We've got a childcare centre on Ridgeway Avenue, which was approved with requirements provided on it for amenity for acoustics regarding neighbours. I am consistently receiving complaints and frustrations from neighbours who their amenity is severely impacted by that childcare centre. We have engaged and looked at that through our development compliance and said that it's completely comfortable. This application would be subject to those same rules, but the residing residents are up above, so they would be, noise travels up. Is there any consideration for that? And how can you provide me peace of mind given on acoustics, given this issue that I've got on a development you've said before where amenity was met?
Through the Chair, we do have prescribed standards for assessing noise impacts. Our health officers have assessed this particular development having regard to those standards, and it was found to meet the relevant criteria under the environmental protection regulations. So therefore, we're satisfied that appropriate amenity outcomes will be maintained.
Okay, so through you, Chair, even though practically lived experience suggests otherwise, based on this other approval we've done, we can't consider that, I suppose.
Through the Chair, we're considering this application on its merits, having regard to what is proposed here. This site has an acoustic barrier along the rear for where that rear playscape is. That area is also adjacent to a tennis court. I think the dwelling to the south is about 20 to 30 metres away from the playscape. There's also road traffic noise that is to be taken into consideration with the noise assessment. It was actually found that the dB, or the decibel levels from the road traffic noise, were actually higher than what is expected for the development.
Okay, thank you. Another question regarding the scale. So we have identified that this is impact accessible. So giving a material change of use, the requirement is that it can be considered for small scale services and facilities. It's my understanding that this childcare by definition is defined as a large centre-based childcare service. How are you comfortable that that meets a small-scale use, given we've got state definitions that say that this is a large-scale childcare centre?
Through the Chair and to you, Councillor Patterson, may I request you tell me where that definition comes from?
Yep, I will. Just give me 5 minutes and I'll come back to you on that one when you're asking other questions. And then answering other questions, sorry. So I'll come back to that. So it is a large-scale childcare centre, but... There you go. Can you say it again, please?
There's a national regulation around education and childcare services. So it's not necessarily I think a planning document. It's more an operational document in regards to the size of centres.
Yep.
Through the Chair, yes. It is other, so in that regard, yes, I agree, it's other legislation used for different purposes to plan.
I get that.
So in that, we wouldn't consider that definition to be relevant, having regard to the scale of the use from a planning perspective.
So then how do you define that it is small scale? How have you come up with and decided that it's small scale?
Through the Chair, we've had regard to the built form provisions within the zone code, whereby we found that the development presents a low site cover of 36%, and the setbacks are generally compliant. It's also compliant with the prescribed height for the site. So we're satisfied that the building that is proposed is reasonably expected for within the zone.
But through the Chair, I don't think, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that that definition, when we're looking at the impact assessment, talking about scale, it doesn't refer to site service, because it's about material change of use in a low residential area. To consider something different, we're saying, okay, it's a small scale business. So it's not about site cover. So like, is this a small scale, medium scale, large scale business? The only definition that we have of childcare centres suggests to us that this is large scale. Is that fair?
Through the Chair, officers disagree with that interpretation.
Okay.
The provisions in the city plan refer to standalone, small-scale commercial uses. City plan doesn't define small scale, and therefore the most appropriate course of action for officers is to refer to the zone and what is anticipated within the zone, and we've done that, and we're satisfied that it is small scale.
Thank you. And lastly, through you, Chair, coming back to the matter of economic need. So for us to consider a material change of use, which is a really significant change to this community and to this area, it is a requirement that we can define and show that there is an economic need. By our own economist report, they have defined it as a modest need. Modest, by definition, means less than. So how are we comfortable that there is an economic need which is met, which justifies a significant change to a residential area when our own economist says it's modest? He didn't have to say that. He could just say there is an economic need. No, he wrote there is a modest economic need.
Through the chair, you are correct in saying that the city's engaged economist has referred to this, or the level of need for this, as modest. It is important when we're dealing with economic reports that an adjective is applied so that planners can understand if there's a low, modest or high level of need. In this regard, it's neither high nor low, it's modest.
Modest is low. Modest equals low.
Through the chair, I would disagree with that.
Has anyone got a dictionary? Because that would be useful.
Through the chair, I have had a look at the definition within the Macquarie Dictionary.
Yep.
The third point refers of modest, actually says moderate. So that's with regard to scale.
So you had to go down 3 before you went down less than small. Okay. Okay, so there is a modest economic need for this. We do have 1,600 places in the area running at approximately 70% occupancy. We had significant submissions from childcare centres that are concerned about something of this size, and also of parents who are attending childcare centres. So the other, sorry, if I can just raise...
Councillor Patterson.
Yeah, I know.
Question?
Okay, there is a question.
Yep.
Regarding the area, right? So again, the difficult thing too is with the area. So for the economists to have come up with it, justified that there was an economic need, they had to look at the local area not as who lives there, but who commutes through there, and relied on a judgment by Judge Kefford regarding a self-storage facility to say that, which sounds like it was quite a different matter. Why are we considering, when we're looking at the area, people who are commuting through potentially from Robina or whatever to say, okay, we're looking at your need as well for childcare centre?
Through the chair, in terms of the economic needs assessment, that they have considered people that are driving through the area. I think what you're referring to is a part of the small-scale standalone test where it refers to these type of uses providing a service to, it says provide a direct service to the immediate neighbourhood. So we're of the view that the proposal would do that as well as service a broader area. I would also make the point that other childcare centres within the area also rely on customers from outside of the external catchment.
Thank you.
Questions? I think I had Councillor Pauline Young first.
Thank you. And through the chair, Liam, it's just one quick question. When we have an economist report, it's based on current figures, current demand, current what's in the area. So I would imagine the information's fed back on that. We're looking at a possible construction time here of at least 12 to 18 months. So I would envisage, if I was even a betting person, that the demand for the childcare centre in 18 months, in 12 to 18 months' time in this area would be higher, considering the amount of approvals that are going through the system at the moment. And in Councillor Patterson's own words, she's looking to drive more into her division and to have that missing middle in her division. So I would imagine that demand for a childcare centre now will be different to what demand for a childcare centre will be in 12 to 18 months in just about any area within the city. Is that correct?
Through the chair, it's a good question, Councillor Young. The economic needs assessment that we've been presented with says that there is an additional need for 89 places within the 2021 to 2036 period. So it's over a longer horizon that has been considered as part of that assessment. And so our assessment is that there is and will be a need for an additional childcare centre within the catchment, and this proposal satisfies that need.
Yeah, and that would be if the city's population remained unchanged now, we would still, but we are a growing city, and we all in this room recognise that we're a growing city, so we're building a city. Thanks.
We actually had Councillor Owen-Jones first, and we'll come back to Taylor and O'Neill.
So my question is whether or not you would accept a recommendation for Councillor Patterson's provided me with some words for a refusal.
I'm happy to accept it first, but I'd like people to ask the questions first. Okay. So, Councillor Taylor, question.
Thank you. If I can just get a clarification on page 473, it talks about occupancy rates of 73%, but then I look on the diagram on 474 with a legend that says childcare centre no places. Just want to understand, are we talking 73% occupancy rates on the current childcare centres in that particular zone shown? Just as a clarification, and then I'll have a follow-up question.
Through the chair, Councillor Taylor, so the green diamonds represent the number of places, not no places. So
okay, number of places. Okay, thank you. And the second question in relation to change of use of any particular area, and we're talking from residential to the childcare, how do we determine what is an acceptable number in a region and area and assessment? I know you're assessing this particular one, but how do we come to that? And I think it comes to that needs of when we need a particular change of use at a particular time. So I know we're growing as a city, and I know this conversation will always come as we grow, and I believe we've got the ability to do this, but how do we determine that?
I might take a stab at this one for you there, but that's the impact assessment part of it. So that's why this use is impact accessible, and that's why a relevant matter is the need for an economic needs assessment. That'd be fair, officers? Yep, that's cool. Councillor O'Neill, your question?
Well, thank you, Chair, but Councillor Taylor actually stole my question. So I will ask another one. Well, I'll just sort of make a comment rather than anything else. I mean, I remember a couple of years back approving, well, I actually didn't vote for it, I actually voted against it, a childcare centre on Crumben Creek Road, and it did rely on a needs analysis around a fairly big catchment, and it did rely on projected figures, and it certainly has it's been a successful childcare centre, certainly hasn't impacted any nearby. So, I just think that, relying on figures today isn't really reliable, because that childcare centre has been full ever since the day it opened, and certainly had no impact on other childcare centres, and there were quite a few in the catchment area. So I just thought I'd throw that in, seeing that my original question was stolen.
Excellent debate and a question time. Councillor Gates, questions?
No question, I just will again foreshadow.
Okay, so I'm going to extend the same courtesy as last time, that since Councillor has prepared some words, that we will see them. Councillor Jones indicated he's prepared to move it, but I'll allow the words to come up first, and Councillor Patterson to quickly, and I mean quickly, speak to her intent, and we'll see if there's a seconder for them.
Okay, so we're seeking for council to refuse, recommendation that council refuses this development permit because it does not comply with strategic outcomes, it does not provide safe access arrangements to the site, it is not a small-scale commercial use, it does not maintain a compatible form and scale to the nearby development, and there is no economic need for the proposed development, which is a relevant matter that warrants refusal of the development. There are other matters of complying with the performance outcomes, but effectively with the concerns around economic need and safety, and also scale in this residential area, I'm having my unicorn moment. I don't think I've ever sought a refusal from this committee before, and I'm doing 2 in one day. So there you are.
So Councillor Owen-Jones has moved it. Is there a seconder for the change recommendation? Okay, so the motion lapses and we revert back to the officer recommendation. Councillor Gates has indicated she's happy to move that recommendation. Seconder, Councillor Pauline Young. Councillor Gates to open.
Thank you, Chairman. And I think the reason for moving this is that, in my understanding from the presentation, it does comply and it is considered a small-scale development. In relation to the residential amenity and the nearby low-res area, directly opposite is an aged care residential facility, and just 100 metres or so down the road is Ashmore Plaza or City Plaza, Ashmore Plaza Shopping Centre. So it's not strictly, in my view, with the very large property holdings either side. It's not your normal low density res. These are extremely large blocks of land, and in my view, ideally situated so that there will be very limited impact from the proposed operation. I feel very strongly too that we've worked hard in recent years in regard to our appeals process, and when the officers present us with reports that suggest complete compliance with City Plan because of the outcomes that are achieved, it's kind of stupid of us to keep refusing them if it's just going to increase the appeals and the costs to the ratepayers. This actual application will provide a service to ratepayers that is identified because of the economic needs report. And in my view, with the left in, left out situation with an additional lane, I don't understand that there can be any argument that it's unsafe. It's actually probably going to be a safer situation than exists at present. So I'm comfortable in moving the officer's recommendation to approve this application.
I'm going to speak to this one quickly. So I have to admit to being unsure on this application before coming into committee today, and was looking to the questions and some of the responses from officers and to listen to the thoughts of other councillors on it, and have come to a position where I can support the officer recommendation. I'm confident, given a little bit more context and detail on some of the answers of the concerns that I had and that had been raised with me, to back it today. And just want to make the point at this time, but to thank Councillor Patterson for the questions and depth of her questions on this one today, and being prepared with some words on it, just while I had the mic. Anyone else wishing to speak for or against in this one? Councillor Owen-Jones.
I don't know if you're taking against. Is that okay?
Against, yep.
Yeah, excellent. So I actually, I appreciate the concerns in regards to the traffic, but my personal view is that the installation of the traffic lights will go a long way to resolving that. And I note the traffic engineer's comments in regards to the breaks in the traffic that are caused via the lights, and I think that that will be a significant change to that roundabout area. But my personal view is that it's not small scale. The adjacent dwellings have roof areas that are approximately half the size of the proposed roof area for this property. In terms of economic need, there are 18 and 19 other childcare centres in the catchment providing 1,600 odd places, and there's currently, according to some correspondence that I've received, some 300 vacancies in those spots at the moment. So I think that it is with those two things in mind that I don't think that we should agree to the application.
Thank you, Councillor Owen-Jones. Any other councillors wish to contribute on this one? Councillor Gates, you seeking to close?
No, Chairman.
In that case, we'll take the vote. So all those in favour of the recommendation? Against? That's carried. Councillors, we have one last item to deal with, which is the late item. I did mean to check at the start of the meeting, but everyone has a copy of the late agenda item?
Yes.
Yep, cool. So we'll move to 6.7.
Is this you as well, Liam?
Oh, I want to give
Have you had enough?
You're on a roll, mate.
Yeah. We do, Liam, thank you for the back-to-back. That was a big effort. Well done.
Wow.
Where's my documents?
How are you?
I will.
No, you won't.
It's not the truth.
You can stay.
Huh?
Yeah. Just bear with us 1 minute. Councillor Young's just going to let some media know she's going to be a few minutes before she can speak with them. No, we haven't adjourned. We're just giving Councillor Young 30 seconds. Yeah. There'll be no adjourning. We got 15 minutes. We'll get it done. Yep. Okay. So, councillors, late item to the committee. There is a presentation on this one. I'm guessing there's an interest in the presentation for this one. Again, as much as possible, officers will move through the presentation a little bit.
No problem. Cool. Thank you. Through the chair, this application is for a combined application. The first component is a development permit for a material change of use for short-term accommodation, 153 units, food and drink outlet, shop, bar, hotel, indoor sport and recreation, function facility and port services. The second component is a development permit for an operational works for prescribed title works. The address is 60 to 64 Seawell Drive, Main Beach, which is commonly referred to as Mariners Cove, and the development application is subject to impact assessment. The subject site is located within the centre zone and comprises of land and water-based lots. As previously mentioned, the site is currently improved by the Mariners Cove Marina, which includes a range of commercial offerings and an adjacent marina. The site is located within the Spit Master Plan area. The Spit Master Plan was established in 2019 and provides the guiding framework for development of the Spit. The Spit Master Plan is comprised of 7 precincts, with the subject site located within the village centre. More specifically, the village centre is broken down into 3 sub-precincts, and the subject site is located within the village centre south. Each sub-precinct includes character, conceptual and development outcomes that guide development for each individual site. To date, development applications lodged in accordance with the Spit Master Plan have been lodged over the subject site and the sites to the north and south. The site to the north comprises of Marina and Mirage, and the site to the south comprises of Lot 503 Seawell Drive. Other notable features of the locality include Palazzo Versace and SeaWorld to the north and Southport Yacht Club and the Main Beach locality to the south. The proposal is for a mixed-use development that provides tourist accommodation, commercial tenancies, marine-based components and publicly accessible elements. The proposal is 3 stories in height and includes 3 levels of basement. The basement levels will provide car parking and commercial space for bar, function facility and indoor sport and rec. The ground floor will provide the hotel lobby, commercial tenancies, the public plaza and the boardwalk. The marina will consist of 66 marine berths and a hotel that will replace the existing Fisherman's Wharf Tavern. The first and second floors comprise the hotel keys, and the rooftop will consist of the communal open space, with the southern area doubling as function facility space. Outside the function facility, the rooftop will be limited to hotel guests only. When assessing the proposal, officers' key considerations related to compliance with the Spit Master Plan, maintenance and tenure of the publicly accessible elements, amenity, car parking supply and assessment of submissions. In terms of compliance with the Spit Master Plan, the proposal includes a high-quality activated development that achieves these aspirations through the mixed scale and variety of commercial tenancies, tourist accommodation opportunities and the hotel over water. Additionally, the proposal will provide the anticipated publicly accessible elements, being the plaza to the south and the boardwalk along the water's edge. An infrastructure agreement was entered into that requires the developer to deliver the publicly accessible elements, undertake any necessary maintenance or repair, and ensure these elements are publicly accessible at all times, all at no cost to council. Another key consideration of the proposal was ensuring an appropriate level of amenity is maintained. This will be achieved through the majority of commercial tenancies being internalised within the site, restrictions to operational hours, acoustic attenuation measures, and a cap of 1,000 square metres of bar land use across the site. In terms of car parking, the short-term accommodation use will provide 45 spaces in addition to 5 car share spaces. The remainder of the development will be serviced by 382 car parking spaces and 30 motorbike spaces. Officers have quantified the expected demand and determined there is sufficient supply to service the development. A total of 25 submissions were received, all in objection. The key concerns related to wealth disparity, parking and traffic, social and amenity impacts, and the displacement of local businesses. City officers have considered the matters raised by submitters and are of the view that the concerns raised have been addressed through the assessment provided and through the recommendation of development conditions. In summary, officers consider the proposed development delivers a high-quality outcome that complies with the relevant benchmarks of City Plan and the SPIT Master Plan. As such, officers' recommendation is to approve the development application in full with conditions. Any questions?
Thank you for the presentation. Questions? Councillor Owen-Jones.
So just to recap in regards to the state's involvement, so the state were a referral agency?
Yeah, through the chair. So SARA was a referral agency, and as were Gold Coast Waterways.
And in regards to the SPIT Master Plan, the state didn't have any issues in regards to the proposal?
No, the state didn't indicate any issues in terms of the proposal of the SPIT Master Plan.
Thank you.
Councillor Gates, question.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just a little confused about the car parking. I note that officers believe that it can serve the needs of this development, but can I just have an understanding of, I mean, is it normal to get a New South Wales publication to actually justify a parking provision?
I'll let our officers from Transport Assessment answer that question.
Thanks, Eli. Through the chair, in terms of like traffic generation, those kind of things, we do use the RTA Guide to Traffic Generating Development. So we can use those kind of things as a, I guess, as a, just to kind of calibrate what's actually required in terms of parking or traffic impacts, those kind of things. But regularly we use the RTA Guide for Traffic Impacts.
Okay.
That's across the whole industry.
So I'm also confused about the 180 spaces and the 50 spaces required by the hotel operator. So am I correct in assuming that of those 180 short-term accommodation spaces, 50 of them will be taken up, which only leaves 130?
Yeah, so sorry, the 180, that's if they were to comply with the acceptable outcome, so that's 1 space per room, so they've got 180 rooms total. The 50 spaces is a performance outcome, so the hotel operator has come and said we need 50 spaces to operate successfully. In terms of, like in the transport hub area, we usually accept a rate of 1 space per 4 dwellings. So if you include the car share, the 5 car share spaces plus the 45 that makes the 50, that's equivalent of 1 space for every 2.5 rooms, roughly.
Okay, and in addition to the 50, there's another 392 for the commercial uses. Is that correct?
There's 382 car parking spaces, and there's also 30 motorcycle spaces. So for each of those motorcycle spaces, we have for every 2 spaces, we count that as 1 car space. So that's 15 on the 382, which is 397.
Okay, thank you.
That was the peak parking demand.
Thank you.
Councillor Jones, you have a follow-up question?
I do, and not in regards to the traffic.
Yep.
So just in regards to the submissions and in particular the impact on the local businesses that may be currently operating there, is that a matter that that is part of our planning decision-making process today?
Through the chair. So in terms of the displacement of existing operators, it's not a relevant consideration officers can have regard to within the decision-making framework that's stipulated by the Planning Act.
And so I appreciate, for example, that the wealth disparity type of comment isn't a grounds for us to refuse an item, and likewise the change in the ability of operations for so effectively it's a private matter between a landowner and a tenant. Is that correct?
That is correct. And just to clarify more on the wealth disparity, a lot of the submissions reference a certain part of the SPIT master plan that talks about budget and premium tourist opportunities being provided at SPIT, and that was where the sort of wording of that heading came from. In regards to that, officers assessed the proposal against having regard to the entirety of the SPIT locality, which provides a mixture of premium and budget tourist opportunities, which we consider to comply.
Thank
you. Could I get confirmation that as part of the marina redevelopment there is no helicopter launch pads? Helicopter launch pads?
Through the chair, confirmed there is no air services land use proposed as part of this development application.
Does the extension of that also include the ability of people to have a barge, for example, attached to the pontoon? So whilst this application doesn't allow for it, if somebody comes and uses one of the berths to have a barge to allow, would that be a separate application that would need to be lodged?
Yeah. Through the chair, yeah, that would be either a separate application or they'd have to lodge a change application.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Taylor, this is in your area. Questions?
No questions at this stage, but happy to talk about some.
Councillor O'Neill, any questions from you? Councillor Pauline Young? Councillor Patterson on this one? In that case, I'm happy to move the officer recommendation. That's seconded by Councillor Gates. I'll use my open as my close as well, just to say that the SPIT is a jewel in the Gold Coast. It is much loved by all our residents and by the entire region that come to visit it. After one of the most significant community consultation pieces that's ever occurred in the city, the SPIT master plan was locked in, and it is right that the community has a strong interest in making sure that the intent of that master plan happens. Redevelopment of some of these key sites, which are major tourism sites in our city, was one of those key intents of that master plan. And it is good to see the industry picking that up and delivering product that, as we've heard today, according to city plan and according to the state government, meets the intent of the SPIT master plan. So really pleased to see this application come forward. Look forward to seeing it be developed. I will make a final comment on the record today in regards to the existing businesses at the site. So while it isn't something that officers can consider as part of the application, we as representatives of the city and just as human beings recognise the fact that it's been a rough situation for those businesses, some who have been there for quite a long time. And while as part of the application it couldn't be considered, we as a city are working with those businesses to attempt to find other sites. And what I hope will happen is that while this particular developer didn't see those existing companies remaining there, I hope that maybe a different developer may see that as an opportunity to capitalise on and propose something where those companies find another long-term home base. Anyone else wish to speak for or against on this one? Councillor Patterson, you had your hand up first, and then Councillor Gates.
Thank you, Chair. I do understand that the lens that's on this today is the planning process, and with that is approval. But I do want to take this opportunity to just air my deep concern, not only for the small businesses, but what that means for access to our waterways for those who aren't super wealthy. Mount Maunganui in New Zealand at the moment is really having a navel-gazing experience, looking at what have they created, where now a lot of their access ways are, it's for luxury yachts, luxury boats, and is limiting access to the everyday person. Our Broadwater is essential in terms of, to so many people, as a way of life. My concern is for this to have come here without support from the state government, and I know we're doing everything we can to find a home for these small businesses, it actually impacts that capacity for the everyday Gold Coaster to get out and experience. I, for one, don't have a super boat, and if I want to go out and enjoy the Broadwater, I don't have any boat, I don't even have a tinny, it would be a matter of using a day hire facility. So it is a concern. I recognise that it's not in the remit of the planning, but it's something for us to consider.
Councillor Gates, your comments.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. I simply want to say that it's really wonderful to see this sort of development coming before us. I spoke earlier today about the growth in our city when we considered the hotel for Movie World. And this is another example of our city really coming of age. And it's so pleasing to see this proposal put forward with the three-storey form that the Spit Master Plan proposed, because I guess there were concerns at one point in time about the limitations that would bring forward, and to see this really high-quality development before us today is actually a giant leap forward for the city. We've also spoken previously about our place as the tourism capital and the need to keep reinventing ourselves and providing new product to remain at that status and to keep encouraging people to our city. And I think this will most definitely be not just within our country but internationally with the Ritz-Carlton. This will be somewhere that people will want to come to. We all know that our city has more boats than anywhere else in the country, and the marina that's going to be provided will be really attractive too. As far as the small business operators that are being displaced, obviously we all feel for them in finding new accommodation, but that alone is not reason for us to refuse or even consider their situation. Unfortunately, that's for other people to consider. So I think there's still going to be opportunities for locals to launch their boats at appropriate boat ramps, which weren't available here at Mariners Cove anyway. And so I hope that locals continue to enjoy what this development will have on offer as they enjoy the Broadwater into the future.
Councillor Taylor, were you looking to have a comment on this one?
Yes, thank you. And look, there has been a lot of commentary about this particular site, and we can't actually make our decision based on the tourist operators. Over the period of 3 years, there's been many operators that have found other homes, but what this has highlighted as a city for local and for state government, that we need to find home for our tourist operators. We have other operators that moved into other commercial properties that could have the same problem down the track. So what this has highlighted is a real problem that we do have as a growing city, and we need to be looking for solutions for our tourist operators in this area moving forward. But in relation to this proposal, what I can say is the developers did work with our planners right through, and I want to thank the officers for working with them. It wasn't the first. There was many challenges to get to where we want, to get approval from state government as well as our planners. There was many concerns raised by the public, but we have improved our Main Beach Drive down there recently to improve traffic. The area needs it. The master plan has been developed. It talks to this type of development. The area needs this type of uplift, and I think it's going to be really, really, really positive for the area and for the whole city. So I'm really encouraged with this, that we'd love to see this up and running and we get support, but it also does highlight some other challenges that we need to look at moving forward. So I think it's a great project for the city.
Councillors, I'm going to call the vote on this one now. So all those in favour? That is carried unanimous. Councillors, that is it for the items today. There was a GBI, but we're going to hold that over until next committee. Can I take a moment to thank officers today? It's been a long one and there's been a lot of questions and backwards and forwards. So thank you for your efforts. And Mick, please pass that on to officers who aren't here any longer. Councillors, thank you for your efforts today too. That's a long meeting with a lot of interesting applications, but some really important ones that we've done some good work on. So thank you for your attendance. We'll close this one down and open up water and waste and then have some lunch.